Good morning, welcome everyone. I'm Councillor Chris Atwell, Chair of the Planning Committee. Limited public seating has been made available, however this meeting is also being webcast to allow the public to attend remotely if they so wish. The public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble by a Queen Victoria statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust's fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting is live streamed and everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera, including those making a deputation. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly they do not wish to be recorded. Please, can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when you have finished, otherwise the camera will remain on you. If there is any voting, please can members keep their hands raised clearly until the number of votes have been stated. Thank you. Let's do some introductions. Shall we start with the front row? Good morning.
Good morning, Chair. It's John Smith, Eastern Craneswater Ward.
Good morning, John. Thank you. Mary, if I could get you a little bit closer to the microphone so everybody can hear you. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Mary Vallely from Cushion.
Thank you, Mary. Good morning.
Judith Smythe, Councillor for St Jude Ward.
Good morning, Judith.
I'm Councillor Lee Hunt. I'm the Vice Chair of this Planning Committee and I represent Nelson Ward. One of the councillors represent Nelson Ward. That's just for the clarity. That's Stamshall, Tipner, a large part of Buckland and North End.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Roland Dent, Cotner Ward.
Good morning, Ray. Thank you.
Good morning, Councillor Hannah Brent for Drayton and Farlington.
Good morning, Hannah. Thank you. And if our officers could introduce themselves.
Good morning, I'm Juliette Gill, the Principal Planning Solicitor at Portsmouth City Council. I'm here to advise the committee and officers. Just like to say welcome to the new members.
Thank you, Juliette.
Hello, I'm Simon Turner, the Interim Head of Development Management.
Thank you, Simon.
Hi, Lisa Gallagher from Democratic Services.
And thank you, Lisa. And if I could ask those giving deputations today or who are intending to speak to introduce themselves, if we can start with Councillor Weems.
Hello, Councillor Daniel Weems, Hilsey Ward. Welcome to the new members as well. The only thing I would suggest is try to make independent decisions and don't listen to the loudest voice on the committee. Thank you.
Councillor Weems, we always consider each application on its own merits.
James Kirby, I speak in opposition to item 2, the redevelopment of Tremerton in the Thicket.
Thank you, Mr. Kirby.
Councillor Russell Simpson, Hilsey Ward, also welcome to all the new committee members. Good luck.
Well, thank you for your service last year.
Carrie-Anne Wells from... Carrie-Anne Wells from Applecore. I've got 4 applications on the agenda today.
Good morning, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Andrew Slee. I'm speaking in opposition to number 2, Mayfield Road.
Thank you, Mr. Slee.
Hi, my name's Matt Baker, speaking in favour of application 152-154 London Road.
Good morning.
Thank you. So 1 second, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Baker. Thank you.
Good morning. Amir Hussain, applicant for 11 St David Road and deputation.
Thank you, Mr. Hussain. Thank you.
I'm Gary Elliott, the applicant for Tremerton the Thicket.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott.
Good morning, I'm Victoria Yendall and I will be speaking on behalf of the applicant for item 1.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's everybody that's going to be speaking today, I think. Thank you. Apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillors Candlish, Shah and Vernon Jackson. Does anybody else have any? I think, Lee, I think you...
Yes, I'm very sorry, but I have to leave at 11:30 to go to the north of the county for a funeral They seem to be coming thick and fast nowadays.
Well, thank you, Lee. We'll make as much progress as we can in the next hour or so. Anybody else need to leave at any time? I think you need to, yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, members. Any declarations of interests? No? Okay, thank you very much. Minutes of previous meeting, pages 5 to 10 in your packs. Are we content? Proposer? John? Seconder? Councillor Dent? Thank you. I shall sign those afterwards. Let's get to today's substantive business. I've changed the order of the agenda. We're going to take the Hilsey applications first to allow people who are giving deputations to do that and then get on with their day. So our first application is Mayfield Road. And if Simon's ready, we will see the presentation. Page is 55 to 64 of the pack.
Thank you, Chairman. I see we have a number of deputations from councillors and from Mr. Slee, who's introduced himself. We'll come to that shortly. This is an application at 2 Mayfield Road, changing the use proposed from a dwelling house to a 7-bed and 7-person house in multiple occupation. It's at the western end of Mayfield Road, at the end of a terrace, next door to, it says Christian Science Church here. It's, according to the signs, it's used currently as a drama, music type facility, as well as a Christian centre of some sort, with its own private parking and access to the side there. So this is the application site at the end of terrace. You can see proposed permitted development extension at the rear and a bike store as well. So there's the application property at the end. That's the alleyway, the access way, gated alleyway to the next door premises. There again, and the back of the property. So it's proposed to retain and extend upon the existing rear structure. This is the HMO data count within a 50-metre radius. For those not familiar with this, looking at the balance of a local community, we look at all the residential properties in a 50-metre radius of the application site and look at how many are existing HMOs, known HMOs, etc., and what the percentages would be were this application to be approved. There are 44 addresses as the report sets out. You can't see 44 dots here because a number of the properties fronting London Road have flats. So that produces a different figure than you might have expected from this. While we're at it, the figure would produce 2.3% of properties within the area, within the 50-metre radius as HMOs, well below the 10% guidance threshold that we use to indicate a balanced community. So it's an existing 2-storey property on the left-hand side with the rear wing, and as I mentioned earlier, with a permitted development extension to that and a roof extension I'll show you in a moment, also permitted development. That would extend the property ready for its proposed conversion to 7 bedrooms. First bedroom there with an ensuite, second bedroom ensuite, shared loo, downstairs loo, and then a communal living, kitchen, sitting dining area at the rear. Upstairs, bedroom ensuite, bedroom ensuite, bedroom ensuite, and then into the extended roof, which you can see here, physical extension on the rear, dormers and roof lights at the front, and 2 more bedrooms with 2 more en-suites. As the report sets out, the standard of accommodation is deemed acceptable to officers in that all the bedrooms greatly exceed the minimum standard for single bedrooms, and the communal room, also downstairs, the kitchen dining room, also exceeds what would be required, and all the en-suites, etc., provide a good standard of accommodation for the residents in terms of their number and size. So, notwithstanding a good deal of local objections set out in the report, the officers are able to recommend approval. Lastly, just with apologies, there was an error in the report at paragraph 9.1, which referred to, in the first line and the second line, referred to a fallback position. That was just a typo. There's no previous history at this site, so that was just an error we'd like to correct. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, yes, a number of deputations. Mr. Slee, you have 6 minutes to give your deputation.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm representing the interests of a number of residents of Mayfield Road who oppose this application. Some of them are present here this morning. I will start with the most obvious and practical issues and move on to the more serious concerns. Parking, a perennial problem in Portsmouth, some might say. The Highways Officer recognises that there could be increased pressure on parking, but it seems to be accepted by the Planning Officer that the requirement for 2 off-street spaces cannot and need not be met. A bicycle stall will be created at the back of the house, but its only entrance fronts onto Mayfield Road. Bikes will need to be wheeled in through the front door, slalom round the staircase before moving through the dining and kitchen area to reach the bike shed at the bottom of the garden. Surely that is undesirable and potentially dangerous with hot cooking pans around. Waste and rubbish. The application shows 2 bins permanently kept on the narrow front forecourt, which the officer's reports finds acceptable. 2 would probably be inadequate and will be unsightly, unsanitary, and really detract from the overall appearance at the entrance to Mayfield Road. Amenity and impact. The Council recognises that HMOs give rise to 12 times the number of complaints about all manner of antisocial behaviour than do non-HMOs. Surely you don't wish to inflict even that risk on the tranquil and family community setting that is Mayfield Road. Sewerage is a major issue. The combined sewer, which serves numbers 2 to 10, is a single line starting at number 2. It runs at the rear of the houses and turns at number 10 to pass under the garage of that property before running along Mayfield Road, picking up the branch from the 30 or more flats in 212 to 196 London Road. At times of even moderate rain, all the properties suffer from hydraulic pulsing, and the manhole set in the garage floor of number 10 feels to win a few centimetres of the top. Southern Water regularly has to be called, but the sewer is simply already beyond its maximum capacity. Add the effluent from 7 more showers, 7 more WCs, and the consequent discharge from washing and cooking, and there is a real risk that there could be a release of raw sewage from manholes in the area. This aspect of sewerage capacity doesn't seem to have been properly addressed either by the applicant or this authority, and Southern Water has not been consulted. The property mix. The officer's report says there are 44 residential properties within that 50-metre radius of number 2. By my analysis, there are 26 residential buildings within that area. 19 are family homes with 3 or more bedrooms, and the remaining 7 contain 25 flats. These flats are on the corner of Mayfield Road and in London Road. They are mostly appropriate for 1 or 2 people and are not within the legal definition of an HMO, as they all have self-contained facilities. Most are tenanted, judging by the number and frequency of estate agents' to-let boards. So, of the 44 residential properties, only 19 are family homes, 43%, just about the 40% that is looked for in PCS 19 as a good housing mix. Also, SPD recognises that there is a need for variety, including the need for family housing of 3 or more bedrooms, the opportunities for which are limited in a densely developed city such as Portsmouth. And the Portsmouth Plan predicts an increase in the number of people who will require larger family-sized properties in the future. So that 50-metre circle is already doing its bit with a good mix of properties without this HMO. And the 3-bedroomed house at number 2, once lost, will never be recreated. The circled area is already balanced, and this application, if approved, could lead to an imbalance. The size of each of the rooms, in the words of your planning officer, comfortably exceed the required space standards. They certainly do. In fact, they meet the standard for double or twin rooms. I will leave it to you to muse on whether you may get a later application to convert to a 14-person HMO so that the developer maximises profit. And finally, the conclusion of your officer's report 9.1. That refers, as you have heard, to giving significant weight to the fallback position available to the applicant of implementing the previous permission for a 6-person HMO. I received an apology that that was a typo, but I think it's rather more than that, and it's been confirmed to me that this is an error and that no such permission exists. It leads me to wonder how many other errors lurk deep in that report that haven't yet been spotted. All in all, sir, I don't believe that if all this council's policies are properly applied, the case for this HMO has been made out, and I would invite you to refuse this application. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Slee. So we have some members who want to give deputations. Do you? Sorry, carry on, you're here to give a deputation, 6 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the new faces in the room. As some of you already know, at Apical, we are passionate about designing high-quality shared homes. We have an ever-growing reputation for high-end design HMOs for both students and professionals. As you will be aware, Portsmouth size standards for HMOs demand some of the largest in the UK, and at Apical, we always strive to exceed that. During recent years, Apical has led the way in terms of designing high-quality HMO accommodation within the city. This increase in quality HMOs is in part due to the high standards introduced by this council, and also in part due to some of the clients I represent today who share our passion for high-end shared living, which has only served to drive up standards within the city. Portsmouth City Council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year land supply, therefore presumption should always be in favour of development. Although the contribution is small, all of these applications today would add towards that shortfall. There is a huge need in the city for high-quality shared housing. With limited potential to build in such a densely populated city, HMOs could offer much-needed accommodation for those in need. There has been a growing demand for HMO accommodation within Portsmouth for young professionals who cannot afford to get on the property ladder, for which HMOs are an ideal solution for an all-bills-included opportunity for independent living. I note all the various objections on all the applications I represent today, and whilst I appreciate the fear of the unknown from the neighbour perspective, I believe many of them to be unfounded. At Apical, we've been managing HMO since April 2022, and we've yet to receive a single complaint from a neighbour from one of our managed properties about one of our tenants. I note various complaints relating to building works. This could equally be the case for a residential family dwelling looking to extend their property. This would also cause short-term disruption to the neighbours. It is in the interest of the clients I represent today to ensure they employ a considerate builder who can complete the works in the shortest time possible. And all of the clients I represent today would be keen to maintain good ongoing relationships with the neighbours. I would also like to again extend to you all an invitation to see a selection of HMO properties we have designed so you can fully appreciate the time, effort and cost our clients put into these properties and fully appreciate why it would not be in the interest of any of our clients to leave the property poorly managed and not maintained. I won't repeat this information for all the applications I represent today and will instead remain property specific for each application. However, I ask that you consider this information equally to all of the applications. To conclude, I cannot stress enough that all of the applications today comply with Portsmouth City Council local plan and all of the relevant policies. The application for 2 Mayfield Road is for a change of use from a dwelling house C3 to 7-person house in multiple occupation. The property provides 7 ensuite bedrooms. All of the bedrooms significantly exceed the 10 square metre requirement, which would then result in a 22.5 square metre requirement of communal area. In this case, there is 31.45 square metres of communal, which is far in excess of the 22.5 requirement. I note one of the objectors says there's a need for a variety of housing within the area. This is the only HMO within the 50-metre radius, therefore it can be argued that there's a clear need for this type of housing in this area. The planning officer has recommended this fully compliant application for approval today, and I ask you to fully support this recommendation and save time and cost for all parties in taking this to appeal. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, deputations. Councillor Weems, unlimited time, but please. Well, the councillors are unlimited.
It's 6 minutes under Standing Order 55.
I can take unlimited time if you wish, though.
Well, let's not, yeah.
No, do you mind if I read Councillor Swan's deputation first, because he's unable to be here? Thank you. So I'll start with that one, and then I'll move on to mine, if that's okay. Thank you for allowing this deputation to be read out on my behalf. Unfortunately, I am unable to be with you due to a prior work engagement that the extremely short notice given for this meeting has not allowed me to rearrange. Greed. A word I believe perfectly describes what is happening in our city when it comes to cramming people into small HMOs purely for the purpose of lining the pockets of the developers and owners of these developments. There is no altruistic intent on the side of developers, and any attempt to persuade us otherwise is futile. I have heard time and time again at these meetings how the genuine and extremely relevant concerns of residents cannot be taken into consideration in deciding on these applications. Issues such as overcrowding in houses that are not designed for the level of habitation the developments demand, concerns over antisocial behaviour that frequently occur at these properties, but yet are bizarrely dismissed as some sort of ward-wide mass delusion that cannot be mentioned or acknowledged. The notion that if the property has bike storage, magically none of the residents will own a car or even want to own a car. Just to give you one example of how ludicrous this is, in the north of my ward, Copner, just before I was first elected, a property was granted planning permission to become a HMO and was praised for its efforts in providing bike storage, only to see on the day the first residents moved in had 5 people carriers. Another small road of 3-bedroom houses in my ward has seen several properties being developed for future applications to become HMOs. As work began on these properties, raw sewage began bubbling up in the road. Why? Because the plumbing in these properties, and in fact the Victorian sewer system in the city as a whole, are not designed for the massive increase in usage these developments always create. We also have the baffling situation where, as the one hand, we are trying to bring more doctors and dentist appointments to the city while simultaneously adding to the problem. It defies belief. It is also true that the City Planning Department are still making decisions to recommendations based on a HMO registrar that is woefully out of date and with no one to correct this, just stating, "we are sure," when asked how they know the count, and in a particular area is correct, when there is no current up-to-date information, is wrong and is highly questionable. It is a sad fact that we are still living with the realities of slumlords and builders who take maximum money from residents for tiny accommodation, a system where maximum money can be garnered from council tax from these properties, built cheaply and hastily at great risk to residents already living in the community, who are too scared to come forward owing to the physical intimidation and threats they receive. Just this week, I have received 5 separate detailed incidences where residents of my ward, many of whom are elderly, have had to deal with builders pressing their nose up against theirs and telling them they better not oppose the work or you won't want to cross us. The true weight of feeling on these applications cannot be measured due to exactly this kind of behaviour. I don't know if any of the members here have any form of professional or personal relationship with the developers who frequently submit applications, but I would hope not. I do, however, feel that given the nature and public feeling for such applications, it would be a prudent move to expand the members' interest form that we all have to submit, not just to include the properties we own, but the usage of the property too. Transparency is vital in all that we do, and I'm sure that this would be much welcomed by residents right across the city, especially in Hilsey and Copner, where an influx of HMO has become a massive problem. In anticipation of the usual "it's all the government's fault" rhetoric that always comes out of these meetings, I urge you to look at other cities, such as Coventry, as to how they approach HMO policy and make an argument on behalf of the residents of Portsmouth that we are unique as a city and that we are the only island city in Britain, and this must be taken into consideration when looking through the prism of the application of planning policy. Finally, and I think incredibly important, we must take residents' views and concerns more seriously and engage more fully with them on how their communities develop. To highlight a particular issue, the current mention of residents' communication on applications is inadequate, and a wider area must be notified via letter for each application. At the moment, this is being seen as trying to get applications pushed through with the least amount of resistance, which, as the process is supposed to be transparent and fair, is not a good look for the authority. We need to go forward with a greater respect and understanding for residents and communities rather than currently perceived status quo of residents being a roadblock to development and include them in the process much more than is currently done. Whether we are members or officers, ultimately we answer to the residents of our great city. This is their home and they are our bosses. It is vital that we never lose sight of that. So that's Councillor Swan's deputation. So if you don't mind me, Chair, if I carry on with mine. Thank you. I would like to voice my strong opposition to this planning application, which seeks to change the use of the property at 2 Mayfield Road from a dwelling house to a 7-bedroom person HMO. There are several significant issues that need to be carefully considered before making a decision on this application. The main concerns raised by both myself as well as by residents revolve around the strain it would place on the sewage system and the impact on parking provision. The high likelihood of there being more occupants than the 7 given, and of course my favourite, the bike storage, and the fire hazards associated with it. These concerns are valid and must not be overlooked. Firstly, let us examine the principle of development. Policy PCS20 of the Portsmouth Plan clearly states that applications for HMO should not create an imbalance in the community. In this case, there are already objections from 34 local residents highlighting the fact there are too many HMOs in the area. Granting permission for this application would only exacerbate the existing imbalance and further strain community resources. This is not a case of a few disgruntled residents, but rather the surrounding community in opposing this application. Time and time again, this administration completely disregards the views of the people it is meant to serve.
That's more than 6 minutes, Chair.
I'm allowing 6 for each deputation, so to ensure everybody's heard fully.
Thank you. If we only just strengthened our policies, we wouldn't need to waste time sat here for hours on end having to listen to these applications. Landlords would benefit, tenants would benefit, and most importantly, the people of Portsmouth would benefit. It's not rocket science, despite some believing it impossible. Moreover, the proposal fails to address the issue of parking adequately. The highways engineer's response acknowledges that Mayfield Road already experiences a high demand for on-street parking. You only have to drive down London Road and see all the flats and all the car owners who then use the adjacent roads to park. The proposed HMO would undoubtedly add to this problem without providing any solutions. The lack of a parking survey and the potential for increased instances of residents driving around the area searching for parking spaces are serious concerns that must be taken into account. You are making a decision based with inadequate information and evidence proving that said application will not affect parking provision. As the local representative, and Councillor Simpson is also here, I can say that the other HMO properties in other parts of our ward of a similar size have caused further congestion and have taken away more parking spaces. There's only meant to be 2 for this application, and if 7 people are in that property, there's going to be more than 2 cars. It's obvious. Another crucial aspect to consider is the impact on waste management and the sewage system, which has already been mentioned. With the conversion of a property of a 7-bed HMO, there will inevitably be an increased amount of refuse produced. It is essential to assess whether the existing waste management infrastructure can handle this additional burden and ensure the amenity of neighbouring residents is not compromised. Our current sewage system is stretched to its limits, and this must be taken into account when thinking about the potential use of the property. The average person in the UK produces 150 litres of wastewater per day. Now, if you times that by 7 in this property, it'll be 1,050 litres per day. That's 383,000 litres per year into a system which is already at its limit. Just think about that. Furthermore, the objections raised by local residents touch upon issues such as the potential negative effect on the value of neighbouring houses. Yes, that's something that is always going to come up, but you need to think about the unsuitability of the road too for emergency and heavy goods vehicles, the increased risk of antisocial behaviour, and the potential for the property to fall in disrepair due to the high demand and subsequent construction. In addition to this, the house has been operating illegally, might I add, for some time as a HMO. This is not the first time that an application has come before the committee, and these operators are showing a complete disregard for the community and for the council. How can the agent sit here today and say they will do so much for the community when it's been operating illegally for some time? Moreover, letters informing neighbours of this application were not given. I've been told by owners of the adjacent properties that they weren't informed about this HMO, and nor were they informed about the change in the agenda today. There wasn't appropriate signage, which is a requirement, placed near the application, so residents weren't able to put in their deputations. The only way it was done is when I informed them of it. Also, this is something I always think is a good thing to mention, is we have these parking standards SPD for a reason, saying we have 2 off-road parking spaces for such an application. Why don't we adhere to it? Another thing to mention is also the lack of communication between case officers and residents. That's something I've always highlighted, and I've always been trying to speak to the case officer with very little input from them. We've had 36 comments against this application, and most of them live next to the HMO. It's not a sense that all the residents from Hillsey have suddenly come in because they've noticed it. It's the people living there. Another point specifically about the application is if you actually go to the property and see the next door neighbour, there's a vulnerable child who lives next door who has a respiratory problem. And most of the neighbours, that's that community sense and feel that we all have to put forward at the council, have come together and made sure that that person doesn't smell any dust, doesn't inhale any perfume, because that child is at risk. If you have 7, that's the minimum. Bear in mind that the space can allow for people to bring their partners and vice versa. So it could be up to 14 people going into that property, and the next door neighbour's child is at risk. If that child goes into jeopardy, I've already highlighted this. If something goes wrong, that's going to have to be the council's issue. Also, another thing I'm a bit worried about is the planning department in general. This isn't me having a go at officers. I understand that they work under a lot of stress.
Councillor Hunt has got 6 minutes. I think you're... well, 6 minutes for each deputation, Councillor Hunt. So, but I think you're almost there. So
I'm nearly there. I'm just going to finish my points. And it's quite surprising that someone on the committee for so long doesn't understand the actual parameters of the meeting. But thank you for that. The planning department has been threatened with designation because they can't hear applications on time. They don't have the adequate information to make an appropriate designation for the actual application. Just look at the amount of updates that every time this comes to committee, you see.
Okay.
You see comments.
Yeah,
I'll
I mean, you know, there's a line, and
what line's that?
Well, you know, this is.
Thank you.
I'm not
I'll
sure what
finish
this
the
is.
deputation, but
Okay.
just look at the application, please.
All right. Okay. All right. And there are a couple of things in there. I would point out that in terms of transparency, I've asked members if they have any declarations of interest, and nobody had anything to say this morning. So that's important. And the other part is around our business is to consider the material planning considerations. And while people bring other thoughts and ideas with them around planning applications, our business is to look at the material planning aspects. Okay, right. Councillor Simpson.
I kind of feel like everything's kind of been covered, to be honest. But I think what I would like to do is really express what these HMOs do to the area, the impact it has on residents and communities in general. I mean, time and time again, I've mentioned about there not being enough parking. And when I say there's not enough parking, there wasn't enough parking in the 90s. So it's only systematically got worse. And now we're just, you know, we should be protecting these family homes and these family roads and not having them gutted out. I think if you actually look at this application, there are some things that we should consider. I mean, a lot of it has been covered by Councillor Weems and by this gentleman here. But I also think that the extension under permitted rights, it already has an extension. If you actually look at 8.6, it's had the extension post-war. So this is actually not under permitted rights at all, and that should be considered. What I will add, as it did seem to go a little bit off topic, is I sat here last year on the committee, and there were many, or I say quite a few HMOs that we did chucked out. I say chucked out, that's the wrong wording, but we did, didn't approve for good reasons, being it one within the space.
Refused is the...
Refused, sorry, within the spacing, as well as the fact that some of the layouts. But while I understand that the policies definitely need to be more improved here, and especially in the north of Portsmouth, where we just don't have the same infrastructure and transportation as the south, I do want to mention 48 Jesse Road, 56 Jesse Road, 178 Parliament Walmer Road, 58 Gladys Avenue, 78 Aura Road. These are all properties which the government overturned this council. And it has to be told that when we do make the right decisions, we are overturned by this government. So it has to be balanced here. You know, if we're given Article 4, I believe it is, or Section 4, to have that, to have that right to, as a council, to say what we believe is right or not, they shouldn't be overturned. But for me personally, I don't think this is a good idea, this HMO. It's way too big. They have to have the extra extension to actually tick all the boxes to get it over the line, and it shouldn't even be happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, questions on this application? Councillor Hunt.
I'd just like a couple of cover things. I will ask questions and I will stick to the planning, not innuendo or attacks on the administration or attacks on the government, not yet anyway. On these car parking standards, which is really what drives a lot of concern at these sorts of applications, and I get it, I sincerely get it. And don't think I live in a big posh house or anything like that. I got HMOs all around me. None of them have caused me any trouble. The space difference, Simon, that we're told by Highways is 0.5, is that correct?
That's correct.
So we've got an increase of 0.5 according to Highways. Would you confirm, Simon, you may not remember, but there was an application in not so far away in Stamshaw Road. I don't know if you were here at the time, but the officers advised us that there was an increase by 0.5. So I moved an amendment to throw it out, to refuse it. And it was overturned on appeal by government planning inspectors. Do you remember that one, or do you think that is a reasonable explanation of what would happen in this case?
I have a vague memory of it, so I wouldn't want to be too specific in my responses.
Yes, all right. And another question I've got is, but no, I'll let somebody else go first. I beg your pardon, I won't hog it.
Judith.
We've heard a little bit about a previous planning permission, and you did say in the supplementary matters that the reference in paragraph 5 was incorrect. I would still like to hear a clarification that the only planning history on this building is a conversion to Form 2 flats, as on page 56, which had a conditional approval, and that there has been no permission for a 6-bed HMO, as was implied by one of the applicants. If that's the case, then I think we should be pleased to see an honest and straightforward application that starts at 7. We have had a particular number of applications that have started at 6. We've suspected they're going to be 7. And so my second question, which is related to that, is this does say definitely this is a change of use from dwelling house to a 7-bed, 7-person house in multiple occupation. So it can't be occupied full-time by more than 7 people, or do we need to put on a further condition? So there are two related questions. Mr. Turner, thank you.
Thank you. Judith, if you could you could turn your microphone off, Judith. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Smythe. On the history, yes, that is now corrected. So you've said it's going, the application is from a C3 dwelling house to a 7-person, 7-bedroomed sui generis. Could that be occupied by more people were this application to be approved? This committee's position is no. This committee's position, depending on the merits of each and every case, but on, I think, all of them that you've considered over the last 14 or 15 months, the position is that an extra occupation, say from 7 to 8 people, requires planning permission. So that is your position and what normally goes as well. So you don't necessarily need a condition attached to this, but that is in your gift.
Yes, Simon, mention was made about how Coventry were doing so much better than Portsmouth, and I've just read the report about it. A simple expediency of actually reading something is helpful. It says here Coventry are seeking an Article 4 direction by the council for the 11 wards where they think that HMOs are too, there are too many HMOs. Do we have an Article 4 direction here in Portsmouth already?
Yes, it covers the whole city.
Indeed, it covers the whole city, doesn't it? That's right. So we're ahead of Coventry. And indeed, would you also agree, Simon, that we have what we call a 10% rule, which means that only a maximum of 10% of HMOs can come within a 50-metre radius, and that Portsmouth is one of the first cities to do this?
I don't recall the order of cities, but yes, we have the 10% rule. We discussed that earlier.
And if we didn't have that 10% rule, these applications would easily be decided under delegated powers by officers, and that this council requires all HMOs to come to this committee. Is that correct?
It shouldn't be conflated with whether a decision is a committee or not. At the request of the former leader and continuing now, the request is that applications from Class C4, small HMOs, to a large HMO, typically of 7 or 8 persons, comes to planning committee for decision if it is recommended for approval by officers, and the same for closing down enforcement cases for the same change of use, and the same for applications for lawful development certificates, which seek to confirm that an increase in occupation from 6 to 7 or 8 requires planning permission. So that's not for C3 to sui generis. This application has come because of the call-ins and the numbers of objections.
Yes, that's fine. So all members have the opportunity to call in an item. Is that correct?
Thank you. Comments? Overall, John.
Just a question about the storage. I note that there's 2 waste bins, and it's noted in 8.24 that there's no formal waste storage required. Can you just let me know sort of capacity of those bins? Because I think 2 storage bins for 7 persons plus, with people staying there maybe, seems a little light.
Sorry, Councillor, I don't off the top of my head remember the, because it will change, of course, depending on the numbers in occupation. So I don't have that information. But I think it's pretty common for people, whether or not it's an HMO or flats or houses, quite a lot of people choose to decide to have their bins in the front forecourt there because it's easier. Others may choose to take them through the property. That's their choice, but it is at least space for it, so it's not on the street.
It wasn't the position of it, it was the capacity of it I was more concerned with.
Sorry, I don't recall the capacity standards.
Councillor Dent.
Yeah, it's been mentioned on 3 occasions about the sewerage. Now, my understanding is that Southern Water have to agree. Now, the Mayfield Residents Association deputation stated that they haven't agreed. Now, my understanding is they need to agree for that sort of excess amount of sewerage water to go in. I mentioned this the other day, and if they've not agreed, then surely we can't let this go through.
For the small scale application, matters of water and sewage are outside the planning system. There may be private matters of, I don't know, of where pipes go, do they belong to the owners and or the water authority, I don't know, etc., etc. They're outside of the planning system. The water authority has a duty to provide the relevant capacity, so residents and or the applicant can engage with the water authority should they wish on this particular scheme.
Yeah, I can say, because considering the sewerage system in Portsmouth is anywhere between 80 and 100 years old, and we're adding excessive amount of sewerage into it, eventually it's going to give way and cause catastrophic failure.
Thank you. Councillor Brandt.
Hello, thank you, Chair. Are we able to request a proposal that this item's deferred to another meeting whilst questions are answered around sewage, parking? There still seems to be quite a lot of things that have been unanswered.
You can move a motion to defer if if you want, when we get there. Yeah.
Councillor, happily answer all the questions today that are arising, if they want to be put to me. On sewage, I've just answered that point. I'd also add that an HMO doesn't necessarily use more water than a family with children, not necessarily. And in terms of parking, again, an HMO doesn't necessarily have occupiers with lots of vehicles, just like a house may or may not have occupiers with lots of vehicles. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can hear someone talking in the background saying about simple maths, but if you've got 7 occupants there, you know, it's highly likely that at least one of those people are going to have additional people to stay or to visit. So I think you will have a lot of potentially additional parking, and for 7 ensuite bed bathrooms, that is going to cause an impact on the waste. The 2.3% that you have quoted, it is still uncertain that there aren't any other HMOs in the area. Has that been fully clarified or explored?
Yes, we look at the data that's provided that you've seen on the plan. We test that. If we have any other comments from the local councillors who we ask, or direct from the neighbours, we'll also look at that. Sometimes a resident will say, what about number 12? We think that's used as an HMO. We will look at that and test that. Sometimes that yields another one that we weren't aware of, mostly not. It's often a flat, for example, it's misunderstood as an HMO. So yes, we believe, and contrary to an earlier comment, that our data is correct and up to date.
And just lastly, is the property currently being used as an HMO illegally before development, or?
Not to my knowledge. If I could finish, not to my knowledge, but it's not illegal for someone to carry out something that may require planning permission, and retrospective applications are allowed as well. But to our knowledge, it's a Class C3 house. But the application's in front of you to change it from a dwelling house C3 to a large HMO.
Can I just remind members and members of the public that we're not here to have conversations with each other. Judith.
Chair, a question was asked about the permitted development, and I wondered if Mr. Turner could explain to us exactly the situation about the permitted development, which I see we would make a condition of if we approve this application. There seems to be some doubt about whether this is permitted development that's proposed or not. Could you clarify that, please?
Yes, the statement was because it was a post-war extension. The point is, at the time of the planning, the instigation of the planning system, 1948, that's the date that's considered to be original in the legislation, and there was an original outbuilding at that location pre-war. That would appear to have been replaced on the same footprint, so you can still extend the 3 metres under normal permitted development beyond that, which is what they've shown. So the extension as shown would indeed, in officer's opinion, be permitted development.
Thank you.
Okay, comments?
All right, thank you, Chair. Well, you know, I don't often get angry on a planning committee, but I am very angry today. But I'm going to keep that to one side. I just want to deal with a couple of things first of all. There was an attack on the planning department by a member claiming that Portsmouth was at a danger of being designated, and the planning officers have all come in at weekends, and they have moved there was 1 out of 7 categories which the City Council, the local planning authority, was under threat designation because it achieved 68% of decisions rather than 70. That's now moved up, I think, now to approaching 90%. So let's give the planning department credit where it's worked really hard on the backlog, and it's done a very good job. Whether or not it will remain like that, I have absolutely no idea, because let's face it, the government keeps cutting funding to local authorities. There was also several attacks on the administration of the council. And this has become probably one of the most political discussions I've been involved in, and I regret it. But the administration's worked really hard. I can go back 25 years to when there were marches through Southsea about no more HMOs and bad planning and licensing decisions. So it's been going on quite a long time. And the reason HMOs have been stigmatised is because of poor landlords, far too many poor landlords, which again is being addressed by the licensing regime in this council. It was made an attack on the administration, and I'm answering it. The reason that we have so many HMOs, Chair, and this is a planning consideration, is there just is not enough housing in our city. It's all right for those of us who've got houses. There are young people now paying out, what, 150, 200 pounds a week for a room in a multiple occupancy, an HMO. There is simply not enough housing. And when we try to do housing, other members of the council come along and complain about it, and they try and stop that too. On the sewerage, it is not this council that has failed to invest in the sewerage. The government has failed to invest in water and sewerage systems over many successive years. And we also know, I think, Chair, you will agree, that that is not a material planning consideration. We had GPs mentioned. It is not this council that's failed to invest in GPs or failed to deliver GPs, but the government. Yet we see members of the governing party coming here and telling us off for it. So I'll stick now to so I wanted to answer those because it was fair to answer them. In this particular application, it's very difficult to refuse it. But I think I hope, I'm not going to move any proposals at all. I'm going to see what other members want to do. But it's very difficult to oppose it. The applicant's agent pointed out that if it were to be rejected, it would go off to appeal. And I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever in this case that it would go through on appeal. I can't see any grounds for refusing it. The parking one is about the only one, but it's only an increase in 0.5%. And we've done that several times before, and it is always overturned. Therefore, the council taxpayer has to fork out the cost of the appeal and any money paid to the developer. So I think I've answered one or two of the issues that were raised in what I thought were quite scurrilous deputations. And I hope that anybody who presses their nose up against an old lady's face is reported to the police, and the police go around and sue them.
Thank you. Councillor Smythe.
Are we on comments now? I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, please, Chair.
Did you have a view about the condition that you mentioned earlier?
I understood from the reply given that because the application says 7 people on it, it would be belt and braces to put a condition on. Is that correct? If that's correct, then I move the recommendation.
A condition will be belt and braces, exactly. Not necessary, but if you wish to, that's fine.
Okay, I'm a belt or braces person, so I move to support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Smythe. Any other comments from members? I will second the officer's recommendation. Unless there is anything else, any other motions any members would like to move? No, there's no other proposals on the table. We will move to the vote.
I will move a refusal on parking grounds, overcrowding, overdevelopment, and out of context with the local street scene and all those other things that were mentioned by Councillor Brent and Councillor Dent there. Is that all right? So I've moved it. I hope you'll all second me.
You're perfectly entitled to move.
I was just going to ask for it to be deferred.
Well, you haven't moved the yeah, that's exactly. So we have a motion that's been moved. We've been seconded. All the rest of it. So we will deal with that. Those in favour of the motion, And those against? And I don't think there are any abstentions. Juliet?
Planning permission has been granted in accordance with the officer's recommendation, and any updates in the SMAP.
Thank you very much. Okay.
And I've got to go, Chair.
Yeah, okay, of course.
I feel
Thank
sorry
Lee.
for you. This is going to go on all day.
Yep, thank you. Well, hopefully we've got some stuff out of our systems now, and we'll move on to London Road. Councillor Mason has joined us. Any Just, you're here for the fun of it? Okay, all right, nice.
Here, sir, because there is a contentious...
Okay, so we move on.
Is that agenda item 8?
Sorry, okay, thank you. Thank you very much, thank you very much, thank you. Okay, London Road.
Thank you, Chairman. At 152 to 154 London Road, we have an application for the change of use from offices to a 13-bedroom house in multiple occupation, which includes a number of alterations and extensions, including front and rear dormers. We had 2 call-ins from councillors, and I think Councillor Simpson may be here today to speak to that application. And I have an update at the end. So up in Hilsea Ward off London Road, which members are familiar with in terms of a range of commercial uses interspersed with other uses residential along this part of London Road, with residential roads to the east and west. So this fronts London Road within a commercial enclave, let's put it. Has residential properties, houses to the rear. In particular, the first one shares the side of its rear garden with the rear of the application site. In more detail, this is the neighbours to the rear. They have a back garden set out with a barbecue area and so on. It's clearly a well-used garden. The application premises 152, 154, so it's 2 original buildings with their rear wings and the gap in the middle, traditional. There's a slight pinch point there and then another open area at the rear and a shelter. There is a rear alleyway that goes down the side that we believe the applicant or hasn't included in the red edge because they don't have ownership, and we believe there is emergency use of that only. So the application proposes to use the front of the property for access. That's the front of the property as is. The proposal would obviously take out the shop fronts from the former office use, place new windows, you'll see that in a moment, a front door and a bin store entrance, and upstairs here in particular on the left-hand side have new fenestration, new windows to match the existing on the other side, and then 2 dormers upstairs. So the property will be accessed on the front door on the left-hand side. There will be a bin store directly off the street, which is a fairly generous depth there, the pavement. And then a series of bedrooms and living rooms across the ground floor. So we have a bedroom with a walk-in wardrobe, a bedroom, a bedroom, a bedroom. So that's 4 bedrooms. There are 2 shared bathrooms, which are there, and 2 shared WCs there and there under the stairs. And then through at the back of the property, we have the principal kitchen diner area, accessed through a corridor, and it goes out onto the back courtyard. And then a secondary, also quite sizable kitchen utility room with the bathroom off it. That's downstairs, 4 bedrooms. Upstairs, 7 bedrooms, with a mixture of walk-in wardrobes, some of them, and otherwise there are 3 bathrooms, shared bathrooms here, here, and here, and 1 WC there. And then lastly, on the top floor, with the front dormer, 2 front dormers and a rear, larger single dormer, more living spaces created for 2 bedrooms with a shared bathroom there, and this area is a further kitchen dining space. So 3 communal areas, 2 on the ground floor, 1, 2, and a 3rd room up here. In the back, communal spaces. I mean, this is the courtyard hemmed in by the 2 wings, and then another area there. It's got an existing structure that would be slightly rebuilt, and some bike storage right at the back. So I mentioned at the start the changes to the elevation. There's the bin store installed there. The shop front's refitted with matching windows, also up on the top left-hand side. The 2 front dormers, and then the larger dormer at the rear, which will be pretty hard to see. These are the 2 rear wings, here and here, and then the gap is the external courtyard. And I mentioned the pinch point through there, and let's call it the internal courtyard. And the dormer that you can see there will be set up above. You'd have to go, really, you can only see a small part of it through the gap here, or you'd have to go some distance away to be able to see it. So although quite a large structure, it's not harmful, we consider, in terms of its dominance or effect on amenity to anyone. So these 2 pictures are taken from the neighbour's garden. So you're looking across the alleyway effectively, and there is the outside structure that I mentioned would be slightly rebuilt with a bike store next to it, if approved. And this is into the garden, again with the same view. There's the same store, etc. So this is the neighbour's garden, and next door would be a 13-person bedroom HMO. There are quite a few more pictures of the rear area and so on. This is within the internal courtyard, let's say, so this is looking towards the house. So that is the principal kitchen living area that I showed you. So on the left-hand side, this back door out into this area. This bay will be removed. A couple of bedrooms at the back that will be have appropriate screening in their windows and a bit of defensible space, so that people would come out and move away from those bedrooms. These are a bit harder to read. This is that space looking backwards east, so where I was just a moment ago. Whoops. That's looking at the house, effectively at the premises, towards the front of London Road. This is looking outside of the internal courtyard. There's a little pinch point, and then open into the wider area. So this would be a shared outdoor area available for use by the residents. With respect to the 2 main strands of policy that we tend to focus on most of all, number of HMOs in the area. According to our records and searches, there are 2 HMOs in the 50-metre search area. This would add a further one, bringing it up to 3.4%, below the 10% guidance threshold in terms of a mixed and balanced community. And then in terms of the space standards for the residents, all the bedrooms are pretty generous in size. They will meet the standards or comfortably exceed them. The sanitary standards are also met and exceeded, as are the combined living spaces across the 3 different floors and the 3 different rooms. So officers are satisfied both on local balance and also on the standard of accommodation as the principal issues that Planning Commission could be granted. Parking has come up already today and is common. notwithstanding the number of people who would occupy the premises, as 13, on a main bus route with local facilities, jobs, shops, leisure, etc., the officers wouldn't wish to seek to withhold planning permission on that point either. Lastly, the update I mentioned, that's right. Paragraph 528, we mentioned other matters raised in the representations not yet addressed, which was pressure on the sewer system, pressure on public services such as health, and disruption during the construction period. Apologies, we didn't go on to answer those. We've done that in the Supplementary Matters Report, the SMAT, which in this particular application, as in many others, those matters are not material considerations with this particular application that would require further consideration. And back to an earlier comment, the number of updates to a committee is not unusual at this or any other authority. And lastly, Natural England have replied with no objection on the matter of effects on the special protection areas, and so recommendation 1A can be deleted, just for completeness. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Baker, 6 minutes.
Good morning, members. Thank you for the opportunity today to speak in favour of this planning proposal. I'm here today as the applicant for the change of use of 152 to 154 London Road from Class E offices to a 13-bedroom HMO, specifically designed for co-living use. Associated works include alteration to the frontage, keeping it in line with the residential buildings either side, and the addition of front and rear dormers, which are also in keeping with the neighbouring properties. I'd like to briefly share with you why we are looking to develop this property. There's a huge need for homes for people between 18 to 35, and this age group are much less likely to buy properties. They're therefore looking for affordable options, which is where shared housing comes in. Our properties are different to the vast majority of HMOs, of poor quality and mismanaged by rogue landlords. We call our properties co-living properties, as our number one goal is to ensure our tenants have an amazing living experience with high quality space, design and experience and service that we provide. Building community is one of our core values, and our properties allow the housemates to do this. The committee has even upheld our standard of property as an example at 125 Laburnum Grove on the 2nd of February last year in this very room. Both Councillor Jackson, who's not here, and Councillor New stated that it was one of the better HMOs they had seen, an example of what Portsmouth is looking for when it comes to shared living. With this in mind, we acquired this property. The existing property is an underused commercial building which was occupied as an office by a care provider. They were only using the shopfront as an office. The rest of the building was unsafe and inefficiently used, but the property has subsequently become empty once they relocated. The property is unloved and structurally unsound, as well as there being evidence of drug use to the rear. This proposal aims to bring the building back into use, which will not only improve the street scene, but will also discourage the antisocial behaviour which invariably comes with an empty property. Our first application for this property was refused. This was for a larger number of applicants, but we have worked with our agent and the planning officer to reduce not only the number of occupants, but also the reduction of the proposed works to ensure neighbours will not be impacted by the development. The property has residential properties to both sides of the property, therefore the change of use to residential reflects that of the neighbouring properties. After a series of amendments, the proposal is now acceptable and fully compliant. The application complies with policy PCS 17, PCS 20 and PCS 23 of the local plan, and also complies with the Houses in Multiple Occupation Supplementary Planning Document 2019. A note here on the refuse, which came up previously, is that the bin capacity requirements have been carefully worked out and verified with the refuse department at the council. The property provides 13 bedrooms which meet or exceed 10 square metres. As all of our bedrooms are over 10 square metres, the property provides almost 74 square metres of communal area at ground and second floor level. This hugely exceeds the 22.5 square metre requirement, and what is going to be a very attractive feature to those residents looking for quality accommodation and space in the North End. This application aims to provide 13 residents, or housemates as we call them, with high quality shared living accommodation in a highly sustainable location. I note that there have been a number of objections related to parking, but it should be noted that a previous HMO refusal due to lack of parking on Twyford Avenue, which is the same example that Councillor Lee was referring to earlier, was later dismissed as a reason for refusal by HM Inspectorate. In this case, London Road lies on a main bus route which identifies as a bus rapid transfer corridor. In any case, if parking is not provided for the housemates, we won't attract those with cars, and we don't mind this as this property is part of a wider network of high quality shared properties in the area, so there are other shared houses where those with cars would be more attracted to. Therefore, a refusal on parking or lack of parking is unlikely to be upheld. We've also provided secure weather cycle storage to the rear to encourage cycling as a mode of transport, and we actually have a full right of way for all vehicular access on that rear alleyway. This application is the repurposing and the reinvigoration of this property. It is not the loss of a family home. It is not the loss of useful commercial space. Therefore, the approval of this application can only be seen as a positive addition to the local community. If the people of Portsmouth and this committee here today would like to see more high-quality shared homes that will eventually see the end of low-quality HMOs and the less caring and rogue landlords of old, then I sincerely ask you to approve this fully compliant application today and save time and cost for all parties in taking this to appeal. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Councillor Weems.
Thank you, Chair.
Chair, can I just step in before we hear from the members? This is the planning committee, so we're here to determine planning applications in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. It's not a political forum, so can we please keep comments relevant to the planning application, please? Thank you.
I was just about to make that comment, actually. I was going to say...
You got it out of your system in the first one.
No, I was actually going to say, just as a comment, that I really appreciate what the planning department does under the restrictions and indeed the amount of work they have to go through. So it's not actually me criticising officers per se, it's more just the realms that they have to operate in. Leading to the actual application, the only thing I'm really concerned with, and it's been mentioned by the agent, is the lack of a traffic assessment that's been carried out, and how indeed they feel that this application won't have tenants who have cars. I do appreciate that the landowner has done a lot of work, and I think that's really good, actually. I think we do need more landlords in the city who are a bit more open to not putting as many people as they can into a property. And I do believe that this application on its merit does look quite good. There are some things that they've done really well, and I do appreciate that. And I'm not completely against landlords providing accommodation. I just want the highest standards. And that's one of the things I always say when I come to committees. If it adheres to really, really good standards, then brilliant. The only thing I am worried about is there's 13 people in this property and there's only 6 cycle storage units. So I'm just wondering whether that is enough. The only other thing I am concerned about is the HMO register. So there's, like that property, the previous application, that wasn't on their register despite operating as an illegal HMO. So I am concerned that there are many applications that come through that might exceed the 10% threshold just because that knowledge isn't there because of the out-of-date information. The only thing I would also highlight is there seems to be a lack of light within that property just because of the way it's structured. So I'm just trying to understand how you can think that the people living in this property, 13 housemates as you call it, I've never had more than 3, so having 12 seems a bit excessive. And in terms of the standard of living, so those are just some of the things that I would ask the committee members to look into, and if they could just possibly maybe have a look at the pictures that they've got and just see, would I want to live there? That's the thing I would say to consider. But the traffic part as well is my favourite line, and I'll finish here, Chair, is, let me just find it. This compares with no vehicle parking proposed and 6 cycle parking spaces provided within a small development. This is not a small development. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I actually think the planning officer's got this right the first time. It was refused, and these are the reasons why I believe it's refused, and I think this is what the committee needs to look at. Firstly, one of the reasons it was refused was an unacceptable sense of enclosure, an excessive noise disturbance and loss of privacy for bedrooms in relation to other bedrooms. Now, if you actually look at this application and you look at the first floor, and you actually compare that to if the planning officer could please get it up, obviously that would be down to you guys, but get it up, you'll see that they've added some more en suites, but actually that first floor is still pretty crammed. It's a lot on one floor in comparison to the others, and I do feel that the reason it was refused is still the same, especially for that first floor. I also believe that this could conflict with the city plan policy for protecting high streets. So while this might be the top of North End, it has always been known for shops or basic amenities. And once again, if you have more properties or more housing, then you've got to have amenities for residents to have. And it seems to be in the North Reports, if we keep building, but we don't build basic amenities. I mean, there's been mention of dentists and GPs, and I know that doesn't come under planning, but it still doesn't get away from the point that if we keep allowing plans to go through to build things without the consideration of these things, it's not ideal. Parking, it has to be mentioned. I mean, whenever we talk about parking here, and they say, well, it's only going from a 4 to a 6, so it won't make a difference. Well, I kind of, 16 to a 13, that's still a lot. And I really feel for the residents of Stubbington, Montague, Connaught Road, where that's where the cars are going to go. And that should be considered with this. So I personally feel that it's still cramped. I think the planning officer got it right in the first place, and I think parking should absolutely be considered here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Simon, actually, could you pick up on a couple of those pieces, some of those comments?
You'd like me to answer some of the comments just made? Yeah. On the traffic and parking issue, the lack of a traffic assessment, I think the highway colleagues tend to note that for completeness rather than raise it as a concern. If it were a concern or objection, they would make that clear and ask for an assessment, and planning officers would then go on to probably say, yes, we agree, and would do that. On the point about cycling, Councillor Wimms, thank you. I don't think it would do any harm to have some more cycle provision, actually, and I'm sure the applicant wouldn't mind either, and I think there is space for it, considering if 13 people, if the application is approved, I think that would be a good idea and reasonable to ask for a bit more provision than is shown. So if members wished to, we could, the condition doesn't specify a number, we're just asking for full details, so we don't have to amend the condition, and that can simply be borne in mind by the applicant and officers if it's approved that a good number of bays is provided. Thank you, Councillor. In terms of the policy protection for retail areas, thank you, Councillor Simpson. This is set out in the report briefly. Lost it now. At 5.4, the North End District Centre policy generally resists the loss of upper floor office space, which this generally has, yet also supports residential. So it's a mixed interpretation, if you like. We certainly didn't want to resist it in principle, especially as with the use classes and permitted development order these days, a lot of flexibility is available for a lot of different uses, moving from one to the other, especially in retail and office functions. So we didn't think that was a real difficulty, but thank you for raising that. And lastly, on the previous refusal, which you pointed out, Councillor Simpson, I've just had another look at the plans here. That was a straightforward decision because it was an excessively sized application with 16 bedrooms, 16 people. The new one has been rejigged in terms of the layout of rooms and so on, but this one had more floor space proposed, both in the roof and on the ground floor rear extension. More people using smaller areas, unsatisfactory privacy and so on. All those matters we've ironed out with the applicant's assistance with this new application. The dormers are now more modest in size, whereas previously they were very large and dominating for the neighbours as well, running right along the rear wings. That's been taken away and restricted to the main body of the property. The refuse and recycling has been sorted out, moved from that alleyway that we talked about earlier back to the front of the property, worked out with the waste disposal services in Portsmouth City Council. So all those matters have been worked through, and now clearly officers feel we've looked at this carefully the disposition, the arrangement of the property. And it's not a small property, two properties put together, we do feel can accommodate 13 people. It's not cramming them into one small terraced house or something like that, because then they wouldn't be able to meet the standards. But as the report sets out, the bedrooms are good sizes, which means less pressure on the communal shared rooms, because you're more likely to spend some time in a big bedroom and have a housemate or two or friends come round and entertain them in there as much as in the living room, kitchen. So we're quite happy with the space and standard of amenity for occupiers provided.
Thank you. So it's useful to tease some of those things out. Councillor Smythe.
Thank you, Chair. This would follow on very nicely from your last comments. I'm referring to the table on page 72. And at the top it says that the combined living space is 39.75. That seems to me very good. It does say, though, later on that the 18.67 and the 15.6 metres of a secondary kitchen and a kitchenette are not required. I think given that this is a 13-person HMO, I would think that they were very much required, and I think, in fact, if we didn't have those, I would be very much minded to refuse this application. As we've got them, I'm not so minded, but I'd like you to clarify why it says not required there. Is it because our policy doesn't cater for the 13-person unit, or is it because, and also a question, that's the first question. The second question is there any way, with the report saying not required, that we couldn't face another application for 2 more bedrooms in those locations if we're saying those are not required? And, yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The policy doesn't anticipate effectively, particularly beyond 6 or more persons sharing. The combined living space requirement is set out for 6 or more persons. So whether that be 13 or 36 or 9 or whatever. So we may need to address that. But I think qualitatively, rather than just looking at a standard, this is exactly what you're suggesting. Well, clearly we need more than just that for 13 people. And indeed, that's what they've provided. So, we can still exercise sensible judgment around the amount of shared living accommodation, communal accommodation, and its disposition and location, etc. So, we've got a good-sized rear kitchen living room, and then the secondary kitchen utility room, also a good size on the ground floor, and then at the top floor, again, another kitchenette, breakfast bar, eating area. So, it goes, the standard runs out a bit of steam, but we're quite happy that what is provided is by any other judgment reasonable and good accommodation.
Is there any way we need to safeguard that, given that this report says not required? Is there a condition or something we need to put on to make sure this, for the avoidance of doubt in the future?
Again, as per the last application, that would be in your gift. It says 13-bedroom house. So it doesn't specify the number of people, and although the plans normally state single occupancy only, in this instance you may wish to have such a condition. I know the applicant's happy to accept that as well, although it's your choice alone. So that would be, if you wish to, a restrictive occupation condition to a maximum of 13 people.
Thank you.
Councillor Dent.
Yeah, I'm going to sound like a broken record again, aren't I? Basically, it's a sewerage system again. We have three showers and 4 baths this time, which equivalates to approximately 16 to 18 showers if you took it talking in volume, which is a vast amount of water again going down the sewerage system. I just need it on record that it's just not right.
Well, Simon, I don't know if you want to...
Well, again, as I said earlier, these good-sized 2 properties here, they could be 2 good-sized houses, family houses with children, nappies, football kits, etc., etc. So, either way, outside of this application process, the applicant may need to work with the water authorities to make sure that, and/or building regulations, that everything is dealt with properly. Thank you.
Simon, the report talks about parking being limited. What does that mean in reality?
Excuse me?
What does that, parking is limited, it says in the report. What does that mean in reality if you had been able to go
well,
out?
yeah, I mean, the streets are, I couldn't see any spare spaces on the streets midweek evening. So, yeah, there's no spare capacity for off-street, on-street parking. Very limited.
Okay. All right. Members, any other questions or comments on the application? No? Any further thoughts about conditions you might, once we haven't maybe moved the recommendation?
Chairman.
Yet?
Sorry, I apologise. The condition in question that we've been discussing was already there at condition number 6. I'd slipped my mind. So we already have a condition for a maximum occupation of 13 people.
And do you think that that covers the need to retain those 2 rooms as kitchens, extra kitchens?
I don't think there'd be any further need to specify it because what else would you do with them if you can only occupy it with 13 people across 13 bedrooms? Yeah, the rest of it's going to be communal space to make sure that the rents people pay are warranted and what people want.
Unless a decision was made not to build one of the... I don't know, I'm still nervous about that. Is anybody else nervous about that? I'd like to see a note saying, including the maximum, however many metres squared it is shown in the building, so that we're not creating a precedent for what seems to be a defective part of our policy.
Thank you. The plan's condition number 2 requires the development to be carried out in accordance with the plans, so we can easily make it clear, well, this room is shown to be a communal living room, this room is shown to be a bathroom, a WC, etc. So I think it's all there, Councillor, respectively.
John?
I suppose the concern is that you, picking up on that last point, is that you can inflate the size. It would be difficult, but you can inflate the size of one bedroom or give that room to somebody else and charge them more money, and it would be at the demise of some of the other residents in that building.
But then you'd have a spare bedroom somewhere else if you occupied one as a double, because you still have the cap of 13 people.
But you've still got the lack of space to those other people to use as a utility area. If you increase the size of one bedroom or gave it, it's out of the, it's far-fetched, but it could. You could say one bedroom could have that room as well, increase the costs of that rent on that room or that dwelling with the additional space that you've now taken away from those other residents to use as a utility space. So I think that's what we're trying to avoid by putting in some condition.
Thank you. Well, I'd simply repeat that the layouts and use of rooms you see is what is required by condition 2. So I think that really covers it in general and specifically.
Would it be impossible for us to add a few extra words there in brackets or something? Because I do think the fact that our own standard is a bit defective on this and needs to be looked at for a 13-person unit could be proved to be a weakness should we have problems at a later day. I was wondering, we've got the maximum occupancy clause on condition 6. I wondered if we can't the HMO hereby permitted shall not be occupied by more than 13 persons, having the benefit of 3 communal areas, just for the avoidance of any possible doubt and
you
the
could say
3
that
communal areas shown on the plan.
Yeah,
that would do it.
You could. Condition 2 already requires that for everything, but if you wanted to add that to condition 6, you could.
I would add it to condition 6, and I would suggest the HMO hereby permitted shall not be occupied by more than 13 persons, having the benefit of 3 separate communal areas or communal kitchens.
Content?
Might people be happy?
Not that nobody's moved the motion yet, but okay. And the cycling?
Additional cycling.
The additional cycling. So we've got a couple of extra.
The condition, as the case officer penned it, she did intend she didn't put a figure on it, intending to discuss that further with the applicant, that's my understanding. So we would certainly press for a good number and good, secure and weatherproof cycle accommodation. I think that's warranted.
I'm not sure
Should we
that's...
go for 13?
Yeah, I think we'd like to apply a number. I think this the... Well,
13 might struggle. That's way beyond our standards.
10?
I wouldn't know until we've drawn exactly what could be where, but I think we can go for the maximum that we can achieve, and I think it would be beyond the normal standard. I wouldn't like to put a number on it, Councillor, because I'm not, physically sure what actually can be achieved.
what wording would you be happy with?
I'd like to propose 10 because this is exceptionally poor area for parking, and once one person gets a bicycle, quite often others think I can have a go. So
Well,
I would propose a condition.
That's the will of the
at least 10.
The committee. Can we put that condition in, Simon?
Well, you can apply the condition. My only worry is if it's not physically possible or means they're in a difficult place next to a window or something, it just creates some difficulties. So that's the committee's choice.
Well, that can always come back.
I mean, cycles can be hooked to walls and that sort of thing when they're undercover, so I would say it would be possible and ask for 10.
Okay, we have those two conditions. I will move the officer's recommendation.
Seconded subject to those two conditions, Chair. Seconded subject to those two conditions, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smythe. Any other proposals? We shall vote. Those in favour of the officer's recommendations plus the conditions? And against? And abstentions? Thank you very much.
Planning permission is granted subject to the officer's recommendation and the updated conditions.
Thank you, Juliet. Let's move on to Shadwell Road.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application from a Class C3 dwelling house at 46 Shadwell Road to a flexible use Class C3 or C4, which means that if planning permission is granted, rather than having to apply each time to moving between classes, across a 10-year period, the owner can change the use from a dwelling to a C4 small HMO and back across that 10-year period. Shadwell Road is in Hilsea Ward, standard Victorian, late Victorian, early 20th century street, terraces in the middle of the road. Property there with a small front garden forecourt, and there is its rear view and the front of the property. With respect to the HMO data count, we have one confirmed, one unknown stroke possible, which we're counting, taken with a third the proposal in front of you. That would take the percentages up to 4.61, below the 10% indicative balance points for a mixed and balanced community, so within your guidance. And then in terms of the actual property itself, so it's an existing 3-bedroomed property. So one element would be removed. This rear extension was added at some point. That would be replaced with a smaller element there under permitted development, and permitted development extensions in the roof as well in terms of a rear dormer. And then we've got bedrooms and bedrooms and en-suites on to each. So bedroom 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. I'm struggling to see my eyesight, but I think that's a living room there. It is, yeah. It's a secondary living room and the main kitchen diner in the back. Because all the bedrooms are well above the 10 square metres, that means the communal kitchen dining area only needs to be 22.5. This is 26.48, so it meets that standard. And there is the secondary living room as well. So the accommodation provided for 6 individuals would be a good and appropriate accommodation. So on those 2 main points, notwithstanding local objections, the officers are able to recommend it positively to the committee, and there are no updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Carry on.
This application is for a change of use from dwelling house Class C3 to a flexible use C3 residential C4 HMO use. The application complies with policy PCS 17, PCS 20 and PCS 23 of the local plan, and also complies with the Housing Multiple Occupation Supplementary Planning Document 2019. The property provides 6 ensuite bedrooms, and all of the bedrooms significantly exceed the 10 square metre requirement. This results in a 22.5 square metre requirement of communal area. In this case, there is 26.48 of communal kitchen and dining with an additional lounge of 13.07, giving a combined total of 39.55 square metres of communal area, again far in excess of the 22.5 square metres. I wanted to pick up on a couple of comments about bins, sewerage, plumbing, etc. So the requirement for a 7-bedroom or 6-bedroom HMO is 360 litre bins. So a normal residential property will have 2 240 litres, whereas in these larger HMOs they have 2 360 litre bins. So quite a significant amount of increase of bin storage for them. In size, they're a little bit taller, a little bit wider, not necessarily much more of an impact in the forecourt. On the sewerage and parking issue, I just wanted to bring, one of my colleagues at the moment is still living at home with their 2 siblings. Two of the siblings have partners. So with mum and dad, that makes 7 of them living in a property. 6 of them have cars, which isn't actually sort of much different than some of these HMOs that you're proposing. A lot of kids stay at home nowadays. Larger family homes, they stay at home longer, can't move out because they can't afford somewhere to live. So yeah, again, same sort of impact on sewerage as the HMOs. The planning officers recommend this fully compliant application for approval today, and I ask you all to fully support this recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, who wants to, Russell? You're indicating.
Well, Emily brought it in, so I thought I'm going to combine a bit of both to save time of having 12 minutes. So, Councillor Emily Strudwick said it best when she said, "It seems Shadwell Road can't catch a break." It feels Shadwell Road seems to come up every planning committee, and planning are still not listening to residents with their concerns. We talk about, it never seems to be important, but parking is a massive major issue for Shadwell Road and the surrounding roads. These family homes are getting gutted out for one more tenant. Sewage overload, lack of professionalism and consideration when converting these beautiful homes with Art Deco features now gone. But one thing that frustrates me, or us, the most, is there's still not a confirmation on the exact amount of HMOs in Shadwell Road. And I'm including the illegal operating HMOs and those that are in Peel, which there is one currently at the moment, number 15 Shadwell Row. And I say if or when it will be approved, it will then add to that 10% in a 50-metre radius. So when we look at that 10% 50-metre radius, are we looking at the illegal ones operating in that area? I know we don't count the flats, which I think is wrong. I think it should be included. But also, are we including the ones that are in Peel, so that if the 10% was reached, and then that appeal also, when it goes through, that will then add to that 10%, so it might actually be over 10%. Are we considering that when we're bringing this to planning? Shouldn't it be that if they are going to appeal, we should wait to see if that goes through or not? Otherwise, we're going to end up having 11, 12%, and it's going to be a real issue. You know, I have mentioned that the whole of last year. So just to wrap it up, overdevelopment and overcrowding. There used to be a time when PCC and the government used to listen to residents. It seems to be that doesn't happen anymore.
I'm very happy to let Councillor Stradwick know that we always listen to to residents' concerns at this committee, but our job is to apply material planning considerations to each application that comes before us. And I think the previous chair, Councillor Smythe, was always very keen to suggest that sometimes we in other circumstances we wouldn't necessarily want to approve some of these applications, but we have to do work within the parameters that are set for us. Okay. Is that it? That was it? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Shadwell Road used to be a quiet road with a strong community of like-minded families. However, this has changed drastically over the years with the influx of flat conversions and more recently large-scale HMOs. Several residents have written to me to express their concern and anger that many of these developments have been signed off without a second thought to those who live nearby. Even within a well-managed HMO, there are negative consequences in the form of removing good family stock. The agent mentioned that some of their siblings or whatnot can't move out because, well, there's no family homes to move into because they've been turned into HMOs. So that's something that you need to be aware of, and within the local plan, we always say that we shouldn't be changing the community feel of areas, but we seem to be doing that anyway. There's a lack of parking provision. I do understand Portsmouth is an island city and there's obviously there's not much space to park in, but if we have our standards, which we've put in place because we've tried to listen to residents, and then at every application we disregard it, what's the point of having them? That's what I always say this, and I've said this for years. And if you think about the limitations of this property in terms of sewage and drainage, I understand that maybe not be a reason to refuse, but there's so many people in this property and it's just going to cause even more problems, especially when you take into account the other HMOs on that road. That's the issue with the radii in terms of having that circle instead of maybe a rectangle. It doesn't take into account the other HMOs that use the same drainage system. Then if you take into account the HMOs we're not even aware of because the HMO register is out of date, there's even more strain on the drainage system. Specifically regarding Shadwell, neighbours of these developments have witnessed one stabbing, regular loud fights, multiple visits from emergency services, waste piled high in front gardens because those bins aren't big enough, and untended gardens which attract vermin and continuous drug use. That is in the public realm, but hasn't been put in your sheets today. Antisocial behaviour is an influx due to HMO. I do welcome the new licensing requirements that are coming in, but if you have 6 people in a property, it's not the same as a family home. And I know I keep banging my head against the wall, and it's possibly not the committee's role, but if we just strengthen our policies, we wouldn't have to waste hours here every week. Thank you.
Okay, you're doing what you're elected to do, to stand up for your residents. But you know, the role of this committee is pretty well defined. So you know, try and stick to the material planning considerations if you come back. While we're sympathetic to the antisocial behaviour and all the rest of it. Okay, questions?
Can we get an answer or some clarity around Councillor Simpson's point around HMO number in that road? The point he makes about the fact there may be something under question might then bump it over the total. Can we get that? Can we get some verification on that, please?
Yes, thank you, both councillors. Number 15 at appeal is outside the 50-metre radius, but we do count any undetermined applications or undetermined appeals in the figures. You occasionally see that, and we will very clearly say this isn't an HMO yet, but it could be under a current application or appeal. So in terms of balance, there are 2 out of 65 in the 50-metre radius, just 2, and this would make a third. Any
other questions before we move on to comments, Judith?
Just a quick question. The The plans show a lounge, and I welcome that very much. It's kind of convenient that the plans also show a utility room next door to the lounge on the ground floor. And I wondered if we could do anything to prevent this becoming a 7-person HMO, which we would require to have planning permission, but it does seem to me that this has some desirable features as an HMO, having the 2 separate communal areas, and that utility room would be very useful, not to have washing machines in the kitchen, and I'd like to see them, if we're going to give permission, our conditions preserving that. So could we preserve those conditions, the occupancy at 6, Simon?
Well, this is back to the position that this committee takes as opposed to officers, where you consider a 7 would require planning permission. So, well, you could do as you see fit, as you wish, if that's what the committee wish, to impose some sort of condition along those lines, if you can justify it.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, can I just... it's a C4 use, so it's up to 6 persons, so you couldn't allow more than 6 persons under the C4 use. It's already in the description of the development.
Judith, if I could just ask you to turn your microphone off. Thank you.
Yeah, just some clarification. The en-suites seem very, well, most of them are actually identical to the square footage that is required. I'm assuming that this will be checked on a regular basis while it's being built, because you're basically looking at a Rubik's Cube.
The planning department don't check to this level of detail on site, but I understand the licensing department is pretty rigorous at whatever stages they visit, either once to check the license or during construction. I imagine it's towards the end, but I understand they do check on all the long list of things that they check on.
Thank you all.
Okay, comments? I think I shall move the officer's recommendation. Anybody wish to second? John? Unless there are any other motions to consider, we will move to the vote. Those in favour? And against? And abstentions? Thank you.
Planning permission is granted in accordance with the officer's recommendation in the update sheet.
Thank you, Juliet. Limberline, Spur?
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application at land on the southern side of Limberline Road and to the north side of Norway Road, Hilsea. It's for the demolition of the existing site buildings and the erection of buildings for use classes E, B2 and B8 apply flexibly, including details of a new access on Limberline Road, parking, servicing, landscaping, boundary treatment and associated works. Just to locate members, this is the large industrial area up in Hilsea. This is Norway Road, running more or less east to west between the north end of Kopner and Hilsea. So there's Hilsea train station, and this is the road that rises up and then down to clear over the railway line. So the site sits down beside that. It has a secondary access at the bottom of the road slope here off Norway Road, and the principal frontage is along Limberline Road. It's actually an open dropped curb all the way along across a collection of industrial buildings, something like 2/3 of the way through demolition under a previous prior approval, but nevertheless demolition is sought again through this application before it's being redeveloped for general industrial purposes. In terms of other land uses in the area, we've got post-war residential development to the southwest, nearest point about 40 metres away. We've got, and then other industrial premises to the west, to the north, and to the northeast. Limberline Road comes off the roundabout just further west, and you head north and turn east into Limberline Road here. It serves 2 or 3 industrial sites, including at the end here into some smaller sites there. Here is a sort of electrical substation, quite sizable, and the railway line. In terms of other access, there is a pedestrian steps that take you down if you want to go straight down from this point. You can then tuck into straight underneath the railway bridge, straight onto the platform at the station. Or there's also this footpath alongside the site, excuse me, with planted on either side with a nice level of deciduous trees and bushes. So that's the existing site. Pretty flat, with the extra height here from the road next door. So this is standing on Norway Road, looking at that secondary access I mentioned, and there's the road rising up to go over the railway line, and there's all the vegetation separating the site from the public realm. Most of these buildings have gone now, and this is looking west along Norway Road. So here is the site behind, with those bigger buildings already under demolition. This is the northern site frontage to Limberline Road, looking west, and this one looking east. So you can see it's just open forecourt with drop curbs and a fairly mixed array of mid-century, perhaps late century industrial buildings, now mostly demolished. This is standing by the Norway Road access, which would be just to the right here, and so we're looking west towards the northern end of London Road and so on. It just shows the nearest housing to the southwest, which has been taken into account in terms of noise matters, for example, by the applicant with one of their various technical reports. This is Limberline Road itself looking east, so the application site is tucked in at the end with the substation and the railway line behind. This is the development proposal. So it's a general industrial B2, B8 and Class E elements for light industrial, which we've agreed with the applicant, and offices. Clearly they are applying to a range of potential occupiers with a range of different sizes, from relatively limited to the larger. The site would have one new access point and the spine road running north-south, with the different units having their front forecourts for parking, recycling, car parking, motorbike parking, and a bit of landscaping, and of course the delivery bays, delivery and collection bays for whatever industrial or light industrial or office process they may be operating from in the premises. The larger unit happens to have its access facing south and its own area to the southeast corner here. There's no through route, that's blocked off here. So this unit 4 has its own frontage facing south onto Norway Road and its own parking there, as well as industrial comings and goings on its eastern elevation, excuse me. You could still walk and push your bike through the route here, should you be coming from Norway Road. Otherwise, some small corners that are left, because of the triangular nature of the site and the rectilinear footprint of the buildings, you get some triangular typed areas which are shown for planting and recreational use, or sitting out areas for staff, really. Because the site is already fully built out with buildings and hard standing, the provision of these sorts of areas and smaller other parts of landscaped areas for new planting results in a net gain in landscaping and biodiversity. Just showing in a bit more detail the disposition and the general arrangements. Like all these sorts of units, that's mostly consists of a large height space, footprint and high space for commercial activities, with the offices, ancillary kitchens and changing and that sort of thing in a 2-storey mezzanine element to each unit. Here are the more detailed landscaped areas to the rear and bits and pieces of landscaping amongst and around the various parking arrangements. Similar things to the southern end as well. Two acoustic screens, I think, from memory here, it's hard to see, and here. Just bearing in mind the residence is just 40 metres over to the side here. They currently have an large industrial area already. Some of it will be unrestricted, so this presents again in terms of control coming in, and the noise technical report recommended these barriers be placed at that point, and here clearly to shield some of the noise from the commercial comings and goings and loadings, etc., of the trucks, and that is being looked at and accepted as appropriate and required by condition from our regulatory services colleagues. These plans don't really show you much more. There's not much to see apart from the large open floor space for commercial activities and the office and ancillary accommodation for the workers and the company. For each unit, I'll skip through those. And then we have, excuse me, standard industrial, I would say relatively standard industrial design and disposition of buildings, apparently quite good quality use of materials and a bit of design in terms of overhangs and different materials and recesses and so on, glazing, doors, windows. So it would be a smart new industrial development, I think, that would present an acceptable face to the public realm and within the site itself. The development will provide in the region of 134 to 210 jobs, depending on exact occupation by the range of types of commercial occupiers that could come here. So that remains to be seen, but clearly a substantial employment provision to be made. The site will be 24/7 operation. Car parking and cycle parking provided within the site. As the report sets out, we've looked carefully with the Highways Department and the applicants on both parking levels and the access into the site, importantly, and those all matters have been addressed satisfactorily in the end. I think those are the principal points I wanted to outline to you. A range of conditions, of course, to deal with various technical matters, drainage, noise, lighting, highways, landscape, and so on. The travel plan, all of those matters are dealt in there. We have an employment and skills plan. There were 6 objections from other occupiers of the industrial estate on highway matters principally. As I said a moment ago, we have worked through those productively with the applicant to resolve those, well, from the Highways Authority to resolve the concerns and be able to recommend it positively to you. Just for completeness, the applicant circulated to members, I understand, I've been provided with a copy of their own setting out of the position as they see it to inform members before the meeting, brochure and details of the application and the business and so on, the redevelopment proposals. In turning to the supplementary matters report, we've got the list of plans which weren't ready quite in time for the publication, so at the end of the SMAT you've got the full list of plans to be approved. And then the second point about the traffic road order, which would be a double yellow line. The site is currently, or that part of the estate is subject to Monday to Saturday, I think, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m, single yellow lines. So it's important that the applicant wants this, and so does the Highway Authority and the Planning Authority, to make sure that there are no obstructions. So this is part of the analysis I've mentioned. All the requisite swept paths in and out of the site have been dealt with those radii. And a double yellow line will need to go in along the northern side of Limberline Road to keep that clear so that lorries can indeed have enough space to sweep in and out of the site. I haven't quite seen eye to eye with the applicant on the way of achieving that, but I don't believe it's such a major difficulty. We would like to impose the condition that is set out on page 1 of the supplementary matters about requiring the traffic road order be enacted, the double yellow lines, prior to occupation of the development, just so that it can operate safely. That's jaunt through the application, there's a lot more detail has been provided by the applicant, as you might expect, with a lot of detailed technical reports that have been considered by various parties. But clearly the planning officers are very happy with the application in terms of its layout, uses, and the lack of adverse effect on any neighbours or commercial or residential. So we're happy to recommend approval, subject to the conditions and legal agreements. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputation, 6 minutes.
Good afternoon, councillors, and thank you for letting me speak to you today. The scheme is providing 7 high-quality industrial units benefiting the local community. The site had previously been vacant prior to Renbridge and Fiera's purchase, not providing any benefits to the local community or economy. The scheme has been designed with a high degree of flexibility to enable a wide range of future occupiers to come forward, responding to the market and benefiting the city. The proposed scheme represents £7 million GVA per annum from on-site jobs and 1.2 million GVA for local businesses during construction. Between 134 and 210 new jobs will be provided. An employment plan secured through a legal agreement will target local employment and training programs throughout construction and operation of the site. The proposed development is revitalising a previously vacant designated employment area in the city, and therefore the principle of development is accepted as it accords with policy PCS 11. Sustainability is at the heart of Renbridge and Fiera's vision. The scheme is targeting BREEAM Excellent and providing EPC A. The scheme is providing an enclosed cycle storage area for each unit, with a total number more than what is required in the Employment Density Guide. The cycle storage areas are also green roofed, enhancing the biodiversity of the scheme. The proposed development is also taking advantage of its proximity to Hillsey Railway Station and the bus stops along Norway Road through the provision of a pedestrian cyclist gate fronting onto Norway Road for all units to use. The level of car parking is considered appropriate for the site and includes 20% active EV charging spaces, with the remaining spaces having passive provision to enable 100% provision in the future. The proposed development is contributing over 10% biodiversity net gain through the provision of an attractive landscaping scheme, including an amenity lawn area. It has seating for future employees, with the area benefiting from the morning, early afternoon sun. There have been no objections from statutory consultees, including Highways, who have concluded that the scheme will not have an adverse impact on the public highway. Each unit has disabled parking, showers and WC with level access and automatic opening doors in line with Disability Discrimination Act requirements. The officer has recommended the scheme for approval alongside no statutory consultee objections. It is in accordance with national and local policy. We consider that this high-quality employment scheme will benefit the local economy and local community, and therefore should be granted permission by committee. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you for that deputation. That's good to hear. We actually did get quite a lot of information from Renbridge, which actually really helped to look at the whole project as a whole. While this proposal has merits, jobs, consideration of electrical charging points, some greening, my concern is the same as the surrounding businesses with the infrastructure of our highways in the area. To quote, the roads leading to Limberline Road are already severely congested at peak and other periods. Often the traffic backs up along Gunstall Road to the traffic lights at the junction of Norway Road and Copner Road. A big new development on the same estate should leave a lasting positive legacy and not a legacy of further continual congestion on roads that appear already to be way beyond their design capacity. In short, the roadworks are dated and can't accommodate the proposal. 6 objections against this development with clear concerns of the traffic due to a one-in, one-out system. I know there was mention of another entry at the front of Norway Road, but if you look at image 3.1, you can see it's a cul-de-sac, so actually, you know, even if they could turn, they can't go away through anyway, so the actual entry is only at the back if you go in through Gunstore and then along Limmerline. Only recently Norway Road was relayed, but it had to be done in the early hours of 1 to 3 a.m. in the morning to residents' dismay. The reason it couldn't be done during the day was because the traffic cannot be diverted due to the one-in, one-out system, and secondly due to the fact that the business would lose money if they shut it down during the day because of the one road in-out system. So you can see there's a trend going on here. How long till the roads will need repairing again if more HGVs are passing through? Probably not that long. Once again, when's it going to be shut down? It won't be shut down in a day. It'll be shut down early hours in the morning, disrupting all the residents again. It is worth considering exactly where this is and what other further congestion will impact the area. It's the only artery going across the north of the island from the A3, A2047 to the Eastern Road. But Norway Road isn't the widest of roads, and with this industrial estate only having a one-in, one-out access, it's problematic as it is. There's PCC had involved with the pre-application for this development, and I would assume this vital juncture would warrant some discussion for the proposal, but we see no evidence in the design statement, transport statement, or vehicle tracking diagrams used in support of the application. I was happy to see the 134 to 210 jobs being brought to the area, but only 102 parking spaces, and I'm guessing those spaces won't just be for workers, but also for visiting customers too. So where will the additional workers' cars go? It won't be in Limberline or Gunstall Road. It will most likely spill into residential roads adjacent to it. I've personally seen that with First Bus Depot, where bus drivers can't park at the depot, so they park all around surrounding areas, which is really problematic. Even the back of the Limberline industrial estate is so bad for parking, they park in Scott Road, which is next to Fox's Forest, to cut through. For the reasons variously outlined in this objection, the issue is whether a safe and suitable access can be achieved for all users and whether there is a severe impact. In my opinion, safe and suitable access cannot be achieved at the junction at Gunstall Road, Limberline Road. As I said from the start, I do think this proposal has merit. I do actually like the concept, but I think the access to get into it is the issue here. I think PCC and Renbridge need to go back to the drawing board, maybe with this proposal in mind to future-proof the access into the industrial estate, which is a fundamental to the city of Portsmouth. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Weems.
Thank you, Chair. I think I actually agree for once maybe with most of what Councillor Simpson said in terms of the biggest problem is just the access area. When I was reading the objections, none really had an issue with the amount of employment that this development's going to give to the city, and indeed the basis of the merit. It looks quite good. The only thing I'm also worried about is in terms of is the state of the roads. So I don't know how many of you are aware of the development in Havant with Amazon. My mother lives nearby, and one of the things she always complains about is the potholes and all the various things that have been caused by the influx of HGVs. I don't know what the rules are on this, because this is probably my first application where I've seen such a thing. I don't know if you could impose maybe that the developer helps maintain the road. I feel like that won't be something that can be achievable, but it's just something to highlight. The other thing I'm worried about is the noise pollution that's caused by the development work and how that the developer is going to communicate with residents and basically have that level of communication that a lot of other developers don't usually do. And then the other problem is the one-in, one-out system. That road is always backed up, and it's quite nerve-wracking when you're trying to get through that part of the city in the morning. It's an absolute nightmare. So I just think if there's some way of fixing that, I mean, the planning officer mentioned it, that'd be great. I think as councillors, we're not against bringing more employment into Hilsey. So if there's any way of working around that aspect, that'd be excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Juliet, are you able to pick up the thing about road maintenance?
No, the local highway authority are responsible for it.
Okay. Questions? Mary.
I was just wondering if you had any solar panels?
My recollection is yes. Let's just check. Yes, there were a number of, you may have noticed in The applicant intends to operate to BREEAM Excellent, so a range of possible features across a development like this that could contribute to that, and it's flexible anyway, but certainly solar panels were one of the identified options.
Councillor Dent.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to agree with Daniel and Russell, which is most unlike me. The road situation down there, bearing in mind I travel down Norway Road 5 days a week. It is a nightmare. The road going down is literally blocked solid normally with vehicles parked on double yellow lines that no one takes any notice of. So putting the double yellow lines down is not going to stop lorries from parking there. If there is another way of doing it, whether it be signage or a different coloured yellow line or double yellow lines, then yeah, but they will park down there. Double yellow lines or not.
Simon, do you want to explain what we might be able to do?
Yes, clearly the Transportation Department have looked at this very carefully with the applicants, with an exchange of information, and to cut a long story short, as summarised in the end, that there is no objection from the Highways Department in terms of traffic generation, parking, the ability of the site to accommodate parking or the other roads to accommodate any overspill parking that might occur. Congestion at the entrance to the industrial area off Norway Road, the trip generation has been looked at to calculate that. So there is no objection from your statutory consultee, the Portsmouth Highways Department. And then more positively, as part of that picture, is the location. It's an excellent location in the city, lots of residential areas, thousands of people within close distance for walking or cycling, or indeed taking the bus or the train on its doorstep. So an excellent location for a mode of non-car transport methods. And then indeed the travel plan that we've mentioned before as well, that will work very hard to make sure that the occupiers make the best possible provision for their members of staff in particular. So it's all the sorts of incentives for encouraging staff to use public transport, to use bikes, to provide facilities on site, showers, lockers, all those sorts of things. That those travel plans are worked out hard to make sure that the site can be the best it can. And to start with, this is a good location, but then on top of that, with a travel plan, that's why the scheme is supported by the planning department.
Have we got the original plans to compare the two?
I can show you the aerial photograph and the disposition of buildings on the plan. So the buildings were fairly crammed in terms of not much space around them, pretty much covering the large part of the site with areas of forecourt to the front and rear and bits and pieces between the buildings.
Well, I may be wrong, Councillor Dent, but were you hinting at sort of red routes and things? I don't know whether... Were you talking about the colour of the lines and things? Something you might want to explain why we can't have red routes in Portsmouth. Is that right?
Oof, I'm not qualified to talk about red routes and stuff like that.
Yeah, okay. There are various reasons we can't have... Judith, do you remember from before? No. Because I know that comes up every now and again.
Yeah, because I work in the area, and literally double yellow lines means absolutely nothing to lorry drivers. They all park there for days on end.
Yeah. No, it's not something we can do. Judith?
I have a question about page 19 at the top. Very glad to hear there's going to be green turfed roofs and solar panels. That's great. I'm interested in the sentence, the details include infiltration and SUDS, the separation of water catchments around the access and the maintenance operation of the drainage works and oil receptors. Could you just give us a bit more detail about what infiltration in this context means and what SUDS would cover for such a building? And I'm getting increasingly keen on seeing, on minimising hard paving, and that's what is behind my question.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, this is one of the technical areas that's been looked at very carefully by the applicant and our drainage colleague. The applicant has gone through the range of possible options on any site, particularly one that's been completely redeveloped, nevertheless within the constraints of the existing surface and foul water sewers that have dictated a site layout. Different ways of achieving a good drainage strategy. They discounted infiltration based on what they believe to be the soil and ground conditions. Our drainage officer would like a little more of a look at that just to make sure that is indeed the case, because infiltration otherwise is a good and appropriate way of minimising surface water runoff. Notwithstanding that, I think he's perhaps assuming that it will remain to be proved that it is indeed difficult to achieve it. He has nevertheless accepted the scheme as it stands. He believes it is a good approach overall. Surface water will be attenuated by large tanks and oversized pipes, mostly underneath the north-south spine road. So underneath there, you wouldn't see it, but large volume to regulate, to attenuate the amount of surface water coming off the site when it rains heavily. The discharge from this site, as proposed, will be half of the existing. So that's very important to note, as well as the small pockets of absorbing a landscape. So all in the round, the drainage colleague is happy with the scheme. Some more details to work through as per the condition, but otherwise it's doing what it needs to do in terms of a modern development, taking account of drainage issues and climate change.
Is there any way we should think about strengthening the conditions on that, which I think are on page 23, and also strengthening the condition on 12 on the hard, soft landscaping? I mean, certainly what's there does seem to be an improvement, but would you think that it's as good as it could be, and could we condition and strengthen those two conditions?
Like most of these technical areas, there's a good degree of technical work done at this stage, but it's often recognised some more refinement can be done, and that is what the drainage officer wishes to explore. So he will ask for it to be as good as it can be, to mirror what you've asked for. I don't think we can specify anything in this condition. The applicants will work as hard as they can to achieve the best they can on the site, as already demonstrated with the 50% reduction, and ultimately they will need to satisfy, to discharge the condition, the local flooding authority, the drainage authority, that they've done the best they can. So there is more work to come. I couldn't specify to what level or anything like that, but that work will come, and the applicant will need to continue to work hard to achieve the best drainage they can.
I hope that the applicant knows that we feel really strongly about this, and we do need to reduce certainly we need to reduce the amount of surface water going into the sewage system. If you think that that's strong enough, then I'm okay with it.
I'm sure the applicant has heard you loud and clear. Okay, good. Okay, is there anything else, I think? Well, look, I'm going to move the officer's recommendation. On balance, I think the employment and et cetera, is a good thing. Councillor Smythe is indicating that she will second. Unless there are any other proposals, we'll move to the vote. Those in favour of the proposal, with the conditions applied. And I think that is it.
Planning permission is granted.
Thank you, Juliet. If you bring, I think we're almost at leg stretch, but I'm very aware that Councillor Mason has been waiting for the next application. So if we can make progress on that and then have a leg stretch after that, oh, okay. Okay. But you're here for?
Item number 5, Tremerton.
Yes,
I do have a medical appointment.
Yes,
which
no, we're going on to that.
I'm grateful.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no. Would, okay. It's literally 2-minute leg stretch if you want it. Okay. Members. Let's move on to Tremerton.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application at Tremerton, the Thicket Southsea, for demolishing the existing three-storey block of 3 flats and to build 3 dwelling houses. In terms of location, Elm Grove is running east-west just a little bit further to the north. This is Grove Road South, running north-south just at the end of the thicket here, with Southsea Town Centre just 300 or 400 metres to the south. This is a little tucked-away corner that not everyone may know. This is indeed a little one-way system around this little island of 4 houses in the middle here. It's clockwise one-way system, and then one way only from the eastern end of the thicket to the western end. We have... you're quite right. I do apologise. You're quite right. I do use it from time to time. Thank you very much indeed.
I'm sure it's helpful, but if we can try not to... Yeah, that's okay. Thank you.
That's correct. It's one way from Grove Road South east alongside the front of the site. Thank you. We have a 3-storey post-war block of flats here, and a mixture of other houses to the sides, and a post-war development to the rear. St John's College, now closed, forms the large land ownership to the immediate south. Here's the front of the property. 3-storey block of 3 flats. The front of it again, with some forecourt and some parking, and then parking is also down the side and round to the back. This is the rear north view of the application site from Hendy Close. Just what you've seen already in the photograph as an elevation. Residential properties close by to either side. We should look at this one in particular because of its windows and proximity on the eastern side. This is the eastern elevation, so here on the application site with some habitable room windows looking east over the neighbouring property. The application is to demolish the existing and replace with 3-storey townhouses. Red brick principally, choice of different detailed materials in terms of some slate, tile hanging and so on, different patterns of brick, mortar and so on. The scheme has been worked up carefully with the conservation officer as well, as this is in the conservation area. So 3 contemporary properties shown, 1 parking space on the front with some sort of landscaping, full details to be determined if the application is approved. A front door to each property, and a bike store. You can't really see it, but behind, you'll see it in a moment on the floor plans, a bike store at the front of each property. An upstairs accommodation with a balcony and a recessed balcony on the front and ordinary fenestration at the rear. The side elevation. The one thing to point out here is on the front balconies at first floor level, we thought it was sensible to have some privacy screens at both ends here and there to take account of the neighbours' amenity to either side. Here's the site plan. So there's the parking on the front for 1 car. It's a staggered arrangement due to the local conditions and alignment of the site, and common with some other staggering on the traffic island, for example. There's the bike store on the front for each property. There's a route all the way through to get into the back garden for the central one, whereas the other two would have side access as well to their back gardens. So downstairs as a bedroom and other ancillary accommodation, whereas the first floor is where the main living, kitchen, dining rooms would be on each one, open plan there, and the front balcony, and then upstairs to 2 more bedrooms, etc. It's important to look at the comparison of footprint, especially relative to the neighbour to the immediate east. The property would this is the existing property. There's one of the side windows I referred to earlier that overlook into next door. The proposed footprint is dotted there in red, so the development would be closer and deeper for the neighbour, so it would have an effect on the neighbour. But as the report has set out, we've looked carefully at this. The neighbour's amenity, these are upstairs bathrooms and a hallway window, which don't attract the same level of protection as primary habitable rooms do. And then the other windows on the ground floor are also secondary rooms to other habitable rooms that light to the south and to the east. So although the property would have an effect on the neighbour, don't question that, we don't believe it to be an unreasonable effect for the reasons I've just given. In terms of height, broadly speaking, 3-storey, not so dissimilar to the existing. In terms of style and architecture, there's a range of properties in this particular area, new and old, good quality, not so good quality. This would clearly be a contemporary addition. No reason to say that's wrong in principle in the conservation area or anywhere else, and we happen to think that it's a good solution. And with the choice of materials is key, were this to be approved. The choice of materials and the details will make or break the scheme to a large degree. There, again, there is showing the greater depth, but removing the side windows. Here's the greater width relative to the neighbour. Similar sort of height. That is a view out from the neighbour's, I think, rear bathroom window at the rear, looking west across the site. So that is you can just about see the rear elevation, I think that is, of the existing 3-storey property and the rear garages. So that view would be curtailed to some degree because the building would be coming closer and deeper into the site, but the outlook from and light to a bathroom is not protected in the same manner as to a bedroom, for example. These are the details of the adjoining property where we've got the bathroom windows, etc., upstairs, and the secondary room windows to the kitchen and so on, L-shaped dining room with the big windows elsewhere. And lastly, an artist's impression to give you a bit more of a feel of how the property would look in the street scene. A great deal more detail has gone into the application, and there'll be no doubt some further discussion on those details. We've, in the supplementary matters report in front of you, we've had 2 further objections raising the need for the development and concerns over pollution and land contamination. And we've had a 3rd objection received overnight, I think, from someone who's already objected, and they're repeating their points about concern about access during demolition and construction, overlooking from balconies, which we looked at, and parking, and the issue, an extra issue from this particular individual or family of contamination and concern about how that might affect any people. A couple of examples given of people with coming out of illness or with long-term illness. So that's a real concern that's properly addressed by the planning committee, planning officers, as you would expect, and is set out pretty briefly in the report, but I can go into that in some more detail, I'm sure, a bit later. Suffice to say, for the moment, it's been looked at properly, and we have a range of conditions to address contamination, which is the concern is from the site to the north, Hendy Close, that was previously a garage of some description and developed in the 1990s. That's where the concern springs from residents' point of view. Additionally, in this matter in front of you, naturally I'm going to confirm their agreement to the appropriate assessment, so no need for recommendation number 1.1. And just a typo, the second recommendation on page 38 just was crept in, that's superfluous and so should be deleted for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Mr. Kirby, you have 6 minutes to give your deputation.
I'm James Kirby.
Oh.
I live at Thicket Cottage with my wife, Mary Jane. It is the neighbouring property to the east and the property that will be most affected if this development is granted permission. I did email all the members of the Planning Committee and their deputies a document of about 19 pages last Thursday. I hope they've had a chance to look at it. To begin with, briefly, I'm going to be a little bit personal here because that's what your home is. It's your personal, safe space. And I want to add some context. My wife, Mary Jane, and I were both born and bred in Lee Park, the biggest council estate in Europe. We lived in excellent council houses built by this council. And it was in the 50s, 60s and 70s a splendid place to grow up. We had good housing, countryside and beach within cycling distance. And my parents and my siblings and I were all genuinely grateful to this council. We were proud council house tenants. I went to St Edmunds in Arundel Street, and later I was a senior lecturer in criminal law at the university just on your left, Mr. Chair. Perhaps that's what's growing up in Lee Park gives you a familiarity with the criminal mind. But don't tell them I said that. My wife, Mary Jane, works with children with developmental difficulties and birth defects. The applicant in this case also lives on an estate, but it's not a council one. It's a private estate 2 miles south of Leatherhead in Surrey, where Google Street cameras are not allowed to go. But the satellite picture of his splendid home shows that there's no danger at all of any of his neighbours blocking his sunlight or overlooking his swimming pool, or of contaminating the very air he breathes with petrochemicals and other dangerous substances. I will go back to what your learned colleague mentioned earlier. This garage wasn't developed in the 1990s, which occupied most of this site. It was built in the 1930s and had thousands of gallons of petrol and other chemicals in tanks, both on and below the ground. Probably involved asbestos in its construction as well. Tremerton sits on contaminated land that was never cleared, so why would the applicant want to demolish a perfectly good block of 3 rental homes, which brings in about £3,000 in rent each month? That's because it's only £36,000 a year. But digging deep into the ground to put up 3 fancy townhouses there would fetch, in terms of sales, perhaps £2 million in total. I've no idea what the building costs would be, but it should still give a profit in excess of about £1 million. The applicant has admitted, by the way, that this property has now been transferred to a private trust, no doubt to ensure that as little tax as possible is paid into the public purse from these profits, should this development take place. So he submitted an expensive glossy application to you, an application that conceals much more than it reveals. In its 91 pages, it omits every single possible dimension on every drawing except one, the height of the roof, which is 10% higher than at present. It pretends that Thicket Cottage, my home, doesn't get much direct sunlight anyway, so doubling the size of the present building and move it right up to our boundary and further north, where it's staggered, right in front of all our windows won't make any difference. These are described as secondary rooms, but in fact those are the rooms in which we spend most of our waking time, the kitchen room, the dining room and so on, which are streaming with light. If this man gets his way, all that direct sunlight will be lost. And all these real, and I submit relevant concerns have been dismissed by the planning officer who reports to you, relying as he does on a sun study which was produced by the applicant, in an application that was deeply unreliable. It is an application that on page 31 portrays the new, even bigger 3-storey building as actually smaller than the neighbouring 2-storey homes, which is misleading. I put that in my submissions to the committee in email. It's an application that pretends the Thicket is a 2-way street when it isn't. It's a tiny 1-way street, just 2.8 metres wide at our end. It's an application that pretends there are only 2 garages to be lost at the back of the premises when there are 3. It is a collection of omissions and misstatements that is an attempt to pull the wool over your eyes. And the applicant be trusted, the planning commission, the planning department say, to tell us whether the site is contaminated or not. He's invited to mark his own homework in this regard. I suggest that's a bad idea. So, briefly, reasons that this should be rejected. To permit this would make 3 families homeless immediately in order to be evicted for demolition. It would be an overly dominant development that is massively out of scale with its neighbours. It would mean the loss of the majority of the present parking spaces, up to about 8 or 10, down to 3, in contravention of your own guidelines. It would pose a potentially fatal health risk to a large number of local residents, mostly in social housing, and as we've just heard, at least 2 of whom are already suffering with lung cancer. But the planning officer has recommended this as there will be the provision of 1 tiny extra box room of 10 square metres per unit. 3 little box rooms. I respectfully submit that represents a very bad bargain for the people of this ward and the people of this town. In 2020, the applicant made a pre-application inquiry, which I would describe as a stalking horse or red herring application, for a 5-storey block with 8 apartments and underground parking. Well, that was always going to be rejected, and then replaced by this current application would look so much more acceptable by comparison. However, Rebecca Altman, the principal planning officer, rightly rejected that on the basis that it's, quote, there is significant concern about the increased height of the proposed building in relation to the adjacent 2-storey dwellings to the east and west. It would have a harmful impact on the amenities of these neighbouring residents in terms of creating an increased sense of enclosure, of overlooking, and a loss of privacy, as well as the potential for increased overshadowing. Given the scale of this present proposal, which has been almost completely concealed, these valid reasons for rejection still apply today, added to the realisation now that this is contaminated land. It may be that the applicant and his rather grand architects think we're all stupid down here, that we can be fooled by the pretty sketches in this application and the glaring omissions, the deliberate misrepresentations. With respect, this is a con. You are being played for one reason only: immense tax-free profits for an already wealthy man. We, your constituents, urge you to reject this unnecessary and ruinous proposal for the sake of so many of us who live here. I thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Kirby. Mr. Elliott.
Thank you. My name is Gary Elliott. I'm not going to stoop so low as to have personal notes about the objector. I was just going to talk a little bit about me, though. I was brought up and lived in and around the Portsmouth area until I was 18. I went to Portsmouth Grammar School from 1972 to 1982, so I consider myself very much a Portmouthian. I am now CEO, having worked very hard over very many years of a large structural and civil engineering consultancy that I founded in 1994, with a particular expertise in embodied carbon, circular economy principles, and true sustainable design. I'm involved with many cutting-edge developments where these principles are being put into practice, and I've spent my entire career on the design of notable and iconic buildings and have worked with many of the best architects and designers in the UK. However, it's not as an engineer that I'm speaking here today, but as a co-owner of Tremerton The Thicket, a small block of 3 flats built in the late 1960s. The flats were purchased by my father and his now deceased wife as an investment for their retirement. Following the death of his wife, I agreed to acquire her half of the flats from her estate. These flats have been let over many years, but are unfortunately reaching the end of their practical lives. The flats have been continuously maintained and repaired to deal with the many defects, such as condensation and mould, that are now becoming increasingly apparent. The original construction was leaky and poorly insulated, and so without a major overhaul, these defects will continue to worsen and the living accommodation will continue to decline. A major overhaul of the flats is not economically viable. In the coming years, new legislation will be introduced for all rental properties requiring them to meet EPC ratings of C or above. In its current form, the existing building will not be able to comply with these requirements and will therefore become unlettable. This is an untenable position for a landlord. Is this sounding, you can hear this okay? Yeah. We are therefore faced with a choice of either trying to retrofit a fundamentally poor quality and underperforming building, or create new high-quality, well-insulated and ventilated houses designed to exceed insulation and energy performance requirements, designed for the future, not the past. They will also be designed to mitigate embodied carbon, seeking to minimise the use of concrete and steel, both of which are carbon-intensive materials, utilising relatively low-carbon natural materials such as brick, stone and timber. We have selected a class-leading and multiple award-winning architect with whom I have worked for most of my career, and I believe that the final design respects the very many constraints of the site, including all neighbourly matters, and have responded to the many consultations that we have had with Portsmouth City Council Planning Department. The aspirational design, whilst modern in concept, will use quality materials that reflect the city's historic context. Some of the detail cleverly picked up on the city crest and the window and balcony screening, which ensures privacy for the neighbouring properties. We believe that these new houses will significantly enhance the streetscape and hopefully create amazing new homes for families that want to live in the heart of Southsea. We have looked in detail at issues relating to constructability due to the constrained road access, significantly exacerbated by our neighbour's front wall, the Thicket Cottage, that has somehow been constructed over the footpath. Whilst access is limited, it is clear that refuse trucks regularly use access this road, and therefore construction traffic, limited to the size of a refuse truck, should equally be able to access the road without any changes being needed to the flow of the traffic. We have consulted with a transport consultant to advise on the feasibility of this. They have produced a report that has been issued to the council that demonstrates that limited-sized construction vehicles can access the road without changing the existing flows and without additional restrictions to the working hours. We have also sought the advice from a respected contractor to assess the feasibility who concurs with this approach and has set out further detail in this report. I very much hope that the committee will see that this is a genuine application that attempts to improve the streetscape by introducing sympathetic, modern and truly sustainable new buildings. Whilst this is only a small development, we believe that this should set an exemplar for future residential development in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Just in the spirit of everybody who might want to contribute doing so, Hugh, did you want to add anything while you're here in the room?
No.
No?
No, I'm not wishing to contribute. I came here because, as you have heard from these two deputations, the matter is contentious. And as the ward councillor, I felt it was important that I should be here to hear this debate.
Thank you, Hugh. Okay, members, it's before us. Questions on this application? There's some debate about the height of the roof. Simon, can you help us out with that?
Show the plans, please. Well, there are various different diagrams that show it. I don't think I have any. Let's check on the measurements in the report. The report at 2.8 talks about the maximum height of the dwellings, 9.4 metre, eaves height 7.6. And then we've got comparisons. There's the proposed street scene. So the eaves height, assuming this is correctly drawn, the eaves height of the proposals are just about the same height as the ridge height of the property to the west. Which, according to that photo in the bottom left, appears to be about the same, different angles, etc. I can't remember if we had another indicative. Well, from that angle, from that viewpoint, that suggests that the existing building eaves height is about the same indeed as well. So I don't think there's much of a difference between the existing and proposed in terms of height, and I've set out how the footprint would nevertheless clearly change in terms of it becoming closer and extending deeper. And I've discussed the windows that Mr. Kirby has also talked about.
Thank you. And in terms of the overshadowing,
Yeah. Of course, it depends what time of day and what time of year you're looking at. In the winter, although this is, in terms of shadow and sunlight, imagine in the afternoon the sun is coming from the southwest and is dropping lower in the sky, again, depending what time of year you're at. The building coming closer may not make any difference. The sun is already blocked, depending on which window you're looking at as well. The sun is already blocked by the existing three-storey building, or so having another building slightly closer, or a fair bit closer, wouldn't necessarily change the amount of shadow thrown or a lack of sunlight from the existing. Again, it depends on the time of day and year. So it's an in-the-round judgment. While studies are submitted in terms of sunlight, there's an in-the-round judgment, which, as I mentioned before, also talks about the overall disposition of rooms and windows in the Thicket cottage next door. And because these are secondary rooms, the non-habitable rooms, so-called, to a stair and bathrooms, and secondary windows to the main living accommodation downstairs, which looks then south and east, there is an effect, as I clearly said before, there is an effect. As is common with lots of developments in a densely developed urban area, but we don't think that effect is, clearly the neighbour would disagree with that, and everyone's entitled to their opinion, but our judgment is the effect would not be so undue as to warrant withholding planning consent.
Thank you. John.
Simon, can I just get some clarity on the contamination point? My understanding is that normally you'd write that in, which is what you're proposing in if condition was approved, and then if anything was found, or there would be a point in time, as you've put in here, that you'd go and view the ground to see that it's in the condition that's required. Is that, can you just clarify for that for me? Because under normal, as I understand it, normally what would happen is there'd be a condition written in on a planning application, and if you find anything, it would be, you'd raise it. But I heard the point made about marking your own homework, and so I just wanted to understand that a little bit more.
No, the local planning authority marks the homework. We are aware, of course, from previous records of the former motor company that existed on the site to the north, now Hendy Close, from the 1930s to the 1990s. That had cars and other works, so that had petroleum storage, other chemicals and oils on that site. So that site to the immediate north of the application site was redeveloped in the 1990s, and at that stage investigations were taking place, of course, into contamination. The contamination there was fairly deep into the ground. And it's quite common when you have such deep contamination not to dig everything up to try to get to it, to remediate it in some way. It will depend on the merits and circumstances of each and every case, but in this instance, as is fairly common, I understand it was decided to leave that contamination alone at depth, best thing for it. And the ground was effectively capped with a barrier of the tarmac, mostly, to the parking area on Hendy Close there, for example, and the physical buildings in themselves. So that development itself would have had an assessment for the human health of the future occupiers, as well as the effects wider of the redevelopment of that site. Now, the matter is raised again because of this proposed redevelopment. There was a possibility that some of the contamination on the land to the north could have migrated south underneath and into the application site. So that is a matter to consider. And by taking up the hard standing and building as existing could, and instating some gardens, for example, and the general disturbance could create a pathway for contamination for future site uses. So that is the understanding of all those issues, and this is fairly common in many cities and in Portsmouth. Our environmental scientists, the Contaminated Land team within the planning department, have looked at this very carefully, as you can imagine. And we've got the usual suite of conditions, model conditions, which first require further desk studies, and the applicant will need to review the contamination information we hold from the 1990s and anything before. So that looked at the site then, the history, and what happened during the course of that development. So there's that further investigation to look at and understand. And then there'll be a site investigation report. So there'll be presumably some sampling, perhaps, it's typical, on the actual application site of material to understand what is there and the type of sampling, its location, its depth, whether they're individual boreholes or trenches, all these sorts of matters are determined on the case in hand, and that will be discussed and agreed with the contaminated land team. And the details of what is found in the ground will be assessed from there. And then you move on to any remediation that may be necessary, and that will depend on what's been found. And again, the applicant, if remediation is necessary, the application will have to achieve the consent of the condition to make sure that the local planning authority is satisfied the remediation they propose is going to do the job for that particular site and circumstances. And by condition 4, they will then, if that's approved, they will then have to verify that those approved remediation methods have been actually taken place. So it's a thorough process and common process for any situation where there is suspected or known contaminated land. So the matter has been properly controlled by conditions if this application is approved.
Thank you, that's as I thought, but I just wanted to clarify it for that point that was made. Thank you.
Thank you, John. The planning history of the site.
I just have brief details. It was a motor Ford garage of some sort from the 30s to the 90s. Petroleum storage, chemicals, oils, normal range of things in that sort of site. And it's now a late 90s residential development with houses, gardens, and parking areas.
Have there been previous applications submitted for redevelopment?
I don't believe so since the 1990s, so I think it was built 20 odd years ago, and that's what's still there now.
Okay. Okay. Judith.
This is a very short question, which will lead to a longer comment later. I'm interested in the statements by the impact on the Owen South Sea Conservation Area. I mean, I live fairly near this, but I'm not anywhere near to have any sort of sight of it or anything like that. And South Sea, the Owen South Sea is quite a unique area, and it's not only a unique area because of the quality of some of the historic buildings, but because of the, to some extent, the higgledy-piggledy nature of the place and of the relative absence of homes that are very, very close together, unless they're a pair. And I wondered if there had been any consideration given to making this development smaller in general terms and to have a more sympathetic relationship with the surrounding homes. Has that been considered in your discussions? That was my question, Simon.
I don't believe so. Mr. Kirby referred to the pre-application process previously, where the local planning authority thought that there was too much development. If we had felt that was still the case, then this wouldn't be in front of you today. So the applicant has worked with us to achieve a form of development. By that I mean footprint and height and appearance and other factors, a form of development that we are happy with. So we don't think it needs to be any smaller. We do, of course, as I've said twice already, appreciate that there are impacts on neighbours, and it's the degree of impact that's a matter of judgment. As you said, Councillor, this part of Southsea is densely developed in most places, and there are close relationships between buildings, small plots, 2-, 3-, 4-storey houses in places, quite grand Victorian properties, nevertheless on small plots with small pieces of land and juxtapositions with their neighbours. So I think that fits in with that broad pattern of development in terms of being pretty dense and constrained. So as it happens, I think this is an appropriate development for the site. People have their own views about contemporary architecture, but there's absolutely no reason not to have something contemporary. This is a post-war building anyway. This would be contemporary architecture, good quality, I think. The choice of materials, as I said, are important. Three townhouses with front and back gardens. Broadly speaking, we think it's a good development.
Should we move to comments?
I mean, I think this is an extremely difficult decision. I've lived in this area for 45 years. I've walked about a lot. And in fact, each part of Owen Southsea's got a different nature. And I was always rather surprised that the properties on the island in the thicket actually had got permission themselves. And so I wouldn't want to be taking an inspiration for approving this application from the houses which are on the middle of the island in the thicket, which I think do jar with the nature of the surrounding area. It is true, we're very densely occupied, but a lot of those are Victorian villas designed to be built without any windows on either side, where the windows are on the back and the front, and where there's a little garden. And often in Southsea, one of the natures is that there is quite a big front area for parking. And it's an area which is dense, and therefore there isn't a lot of on-street parking relative to some places. And my feelings about this are that there are a group of what I would call cottages, a bit like the Thicket Cottage, but also back further into the thicket and down, what's the road that goes down? The Retreat. And the other, but down there that are of a nature, and that this property, in my view, is not going to enhance that. It's going to look very blocky. It's a big block. It is taller than the surrounding properties. It's on a bigger footprint than the pretty undistinguished Tremerton that's there at the moment. And I would like to refuse this with the knowledge, almost certainly, that the applicant will come back with something else, because I can see that Tremerton might have reached the end of its natural life, but with the hopes that there be some more attempt to step down towards Thicket Cottage and to keep more of the off-street parking, which is important, and also to produce something of a bit more architectural quality. I particularly like the very new building that's been built. I think it's on Merton Road. I think it's superb, and it really makes use of the site, and it's not very high, and it looks great. That's real architecture. Whereas my personal view is that this is not going to hit the spot for me, and I would like to recommend refusing on the grounds of overdevelopment of the site, and I think if there's a planning way of putting too big, then that's what I want to say. So it's height and mass, please. And I may be alone on that, but that's my view as a long-term Southsea resident.
I would second that, Chair.
Judith, sorry.
I would second the refusal, Chair.
You're seconding. Well, okay. Well, that's the proposal. We need a form of words, though, that's going to be acceptable. Do you want a couple of minutes?
I'd like a few minutes, if you don't mind, if you wish to do that.
Okay, we'll have a couple of minutes to come up with some words to see if they're acceptable. Judith, if you could pop your microphone off, that would be useful. Thank you.
Chair, just while it's being done, I mean, there's something here about the relatively little gain in terms of housing from this. These are not very big houses that are being produced here. They're only 2 bedrooms, and they are, I think that's right, and they are not, I think the ones just up the road are not houses that should be replicated.
Well, let's see what the room thinks when we have a form of words. We might want to bring in the overshadowing in the
other reasons for refusing this application.
So so we've got it. So overshadowing, overdevelopment, too big, or how we want to word
Mass,
that
yeah.
in terms of massing and height. Okay. I'm sure Simon will produce something. It is quite warm in here. Are the windows open? No breeze, I'm sure. Hannah, were you 2:30? You needed to be somewhere. Did you need to leave at 2:30? Okay, thank you very much. Simon, for a form of words.
Thank you. Right. One councillor has asked for reasons for refusal and has given some reasons that may or may not be voted successfully by the committee. But in case that is agreed by the committee, a draft reason here is the proposed development is oversized for the plots available in height, footprint and mass, and would have consequent adverse effects on the amenity of the adjoining residential occupier to the east, Thicket Cottage, in terms of loss of light, overshadowing and dominance. Architectural quality is also insufficient. The scale and position and design of the building would also harm the character and appearance of the conservation area. As such, the proposal would conflict with policy PCS 23 of the Portsmouth Local Plan and the provisions of the MPPF. If that is held up, I would just like to reserve slight tweaking, but hopefully that's mostly there for you. As you're aware, officers don't agree with that position, and I can continue to answer any questions if members would like me to.
Thank you, Simon.
The wording is fine for me, and thank you very much for spending time on that.
And Councillor Brent, you're happy, content with the wording as well? Well, it's the motion that's before us, unless anybody else has anything else.
Sorry, and secondly, if the vote is to refuse the application on that reason, there will be a second reason, a technical reason, in the absence of any mitigation for the special protection areas of the harbours and Solent. There'd have to be a technical second reason for refusal due to the lack of mitigation.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
So, Proposer and Secretary, you're happy with all of that? Well, does anybody else have anything else to add in terms of comments on the application or any other motions to move? Okay, well, we vote on the motion that's in front of us to refuse this planning application. Those in favour? And those against? And abstentions?
Planning permission was refused for the reasons set out by Simon Turner.
Thank you, Juliet. Okay, Chichester Road.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application at 172 Chichester Road in Copner Ward. The change of use from a Class 3 dwelling house to a 7-person house in multiple occupation, which is sui generis. Terrace property, the fifth one along. And I don't know how clear the photograph is for you, but there is a rear alleyway, dog legs its way down along east to west, which provides access to the rear of the property. There, you can see it better there in the plan. So it's a 2-storey house at present. There it is. That would be converted, if approved, into a 7-bedroomed HMO with a ensuite bedrooms throughout. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 into the roof with rear storey permitted development extension and roof extensions as well. In respect of the local mix in the 50 metres, 2 existing HMOs, and this one has already been granted actually, so the figure would be 4.68. So since we already have a planning permission in place, that doesn't actually change with this application because of the C3, C4 consent from earlier this year. So in any event, the property mix locally is within the policy indicative threshold of 10%. And in terms of the living accommodation for the 7 residents, all the bedrooms exceed the minimum space standard, which means the shared communal kitchen can be at the 22.5 square metre standard. In this instance, it is 26.2. So again, that exceeds your guideline standards, as do the ensuite bathrooms. So in a nutshell, notwithstanding objections and concerns on normal range of matters, quite a few set out there for you, the application complies with policy and officers believe it to be acceptable. Just by way of clarification, a couple of typos with apologies in the report. Para 812 said 8 persons, it's 7, as the development description says. And also the communal dining space was misquoted at 26, actually 28.2 square metres. Just a couple of corrections there. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
This application is for change of use from a dwelling house class C3 to 7-person house and multiple occupation. A previous application has been approved for a C4 6-person use, which could be implemented at any time. However, due to the clear need for housing in the city, the property has now been designed to offer 7 high-end ensuite bedrooms. As this previous scheme could be implemented at any time, the committee today are in reality just considering the addition of 1 person to a previously approved scheme. The physical works of this property are currently being project managed by Applecor, and works are being carried out in a timely manner by a team of considerate builders. Efforts have been made to cause at least possible disruption to neighbours as possible. The property will then be managed by Applecor once completed, thus ensuring any issues that may arise are dealt with in a timely manner and repairs are dealt with promptly, ensuring the tenant is provided with excellent standard of living and a positive rental experience. Cycle storage is provided within the rear garden, and a rear alleyway provides access to the cycle storage. The property also benefits from bus stops in each direction, almost directly outside of the property. The property provides 7 ensuite bedrooms, and all of the bedrooms significantly exceed the 10 square metre requirement, which then results in a 22.5 square metre requirement of communal area. In this case, there is 28.2 square metres of communal area with an additional laundry room of 4.92, giving a combined total of 33.12 square metres, again far in excess of the 22.5 square metre requirement. The application complies with policy PCS 17, PCS 20 and PCS 23 of the local plan, and also complies with the Housing Multiple Occupation Supplementary Planning Document 2019. I picked up on a couple of things on sizes. You were saying about en-suites, I think somebody earlier, about the sizes. I also want to reassure you that licensing standards do check the property afterwards, and they're quite strict in applying the space standards, and the licence wouldn't be granted if the property or the size standards or the rooms were not fit for purpose. The planning officer has recommended this fully compliant application for approval today, and I ask you all to fully support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions? Comments? You tempted? Okay. Well, I think I shall move the officer's recommendation. I'm not sure there's any value in doing anything other than that. Councillor Smith, you're indicating you're happy to second? Okay. Thank you. Any other views, comments, ideas? No? Okay, if that's what we have in front of us, those in favour of the motion? Okay, and against? Abstentions? Okay, thank you.
Planning permission is granted.
Thank you, Julia. St David's Road, St David's no apostrophe. There is no apostrophe. In the report, apostrophes all over the place.
Thank you, Chairman. This is St David's Road, number 11, an application for a replacement front door, widening of the drop curb and partial removal of the front boundary wall and the repositioning of the pier in order to provide an extra parking space. This application is within the St David's conservation area, hence it coming to Planning Committee because of the Article 4 direction there, removing permitted development rights for such matters as boundary wall and front door. It's at the southern end of St David's Road towards Victoria Road, it must be, winding its way round. So large properties in an attractive conservation area with enough space on their forecourts for some degree of parking, subject to access to the forecourts or front gardens, depending on the width of boundary treatments, etc. So that's the application site, yes, number 11, with its existing arrangement. Next door is number 13. We highlight number 13 because, as the report makes clear, this applicant also applied for a wider driveway to remove or to shift the pier sideways to get extra width in. That was refused by the planning authority under delegated powers, but the inspector unfortunately decided it was acceptable and allowed the appeal. Purely on that basis, we feel obliged as officers to recommend the same approval for the mirror application next door at number 11. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Hussain, for waiting, by the way, all this time. Officers don't believe that removal of front boundary wall and associated vegetation in a conservation area is a good thing. Indeed, it's harmful to the streetscape. But nevertheless, because of an identical, effectively, application next door, so recently allowed by the inspectorate, we do not feel in a position to resist this one as well. So this is what you've just seen on the front of the existing arrangements. Just take you back to these pier cappings are a particular feature of the road, and I've seen them elsewhere as well with decoration on them. We've been discussing with the applicant the reinstatement of one. I don't think there's one at the moment, but the reinstatement of one on the new pier, and that is achieved by condition. So that would be the widened access from about 2.7 metres to 5.4 to enable a second car to be able to get onto the site front. That's the appeal next door at number 13, again showing the previous arrangements existing and then the wider arrangement to the same point, the same width as proposed at number 11. It's another example at number 15. There are some examples of this happening already, and this will be a pattern that will continue on the back of these decisions. There's the existing front door, proposed new composite front door within the porchway there. So pretty discreet within the similar design, as you can see, and set back in the porch. It wouldn't be an unduly prominent feature or anything at all. So there we are. That's the position of the officers and the recommendation based on the appeal decision, the recent appeal decision next door. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Mr. and Mrs. Hussain, you've been very patient.
No, thank you, Chair. My name is Amir Hussain. I'm here with my wife, Dilshana, as the applicant and resident of 11 St David's Road. With respect to the planning application and in relation to the entrance door, this is currently made out of timber, but is no longer fit for purpose. It lacks thermal efficiency and security. On the underside of the door, it's partially rotting away, so we've got a 5 centimetre gap, which is letting in cold air, not great for the winter. The proposed composite door will have historic character. It will be custom built and it will provide more security and thermal efficiency. Similar permission was granted by the council in 2018 to 10 St David's Road for change of door. With respect to the driveway, currently this allows for one vehicle access. As working family, we have 2 cars, which means one car sits parked on the road and sometimes both. We have a similar entrance to the pillar on the left-hand side to the right-hand side, which is approximately 240 centimetres wide. With a family car being approximately 200 centimetres, it's quite narrow to drive in and out safely. And this is exacerbated by the cars that often overhang from the regulated marking positions. So we might have a car that is parked on the white line, but the bonnet or the boot will overhang, which causes us problems when we're trying to enter or leave our driveway. And it's absolutely impossible for us to reverse out of 11 St David's Road because of the tight entrance. So the proposal is to obviously widen the entrance to the left when looking from the road, to rebuild the wall with the existing pillar. So cosmetically, it will look no different. We're going to use existing brick or match the brickwork where obviously it's not possible to do so. And I'll be looking to retain as much of the hedging as possible. So it will be like for like, and I believe this will actually enhance the look of the street. Widening the drop curb will accommodate 2 cars and thereby freeing up space that I'm otherwise taking on the main road. And obviously similar permission was granted to 15 St David's Road and 13 St David's Road. And it's obviously my desire to work with the planning officer to ensure that I maintain the heritage of the road and the property. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and thank you again for your patience. Members, Councillor Smith.
Chair, I would just, hearing what the inspector said about the other 15 and 13, I would move the motion really and say on that basis, given the fact that they would, any other decision we made, they'd overturn it, I would pass it on that. I think it looks good. Only thing I'd add is maybe if we could add a condition around the capping, because there's no, on the plan that we saw, drawing that we saw, there was no capping to that, but maybe if that could be, it was alluded to, but if we put that in as a condition, that would just enhance the area maybe.
That's a good idea. Sam, can we can add that.
Thank you. We refer to the coping, the capping already in condition 3, so we are seeking full details of that.
So we're covered. Okay. Judith.
With a heavy heart, I accept exactly what Councillor Smith has said and would second that. Can we put a further condition on, though, about having a permeable surface to the parking space? We need to be depaving Southsea, not increasing the areas where there's runoff into the sewers, because that's the kind of setup we have there. So I'd like to put a condition to have a permeable surface to the parking area, which I think would improve the infiltration that we were talking about earlier. And if you want to come see mine in Victoria Road South, it's got a very nice surface and lots of planting, and that's what I am advocating. We must not put more paving over Southsea.
Thank you, Judith.
Happily apply an extra condition.
Okay. Members, anything else? We've had a reasonably long wait, but I think we're probably there. With those conditions, Councillors Smith and Smythe, motion to accept the officer's recommendations. Those in favour? Okay, I think that's it.
That's unanimous. Planning permission is granted.
Thank you. I hope your time hasn't been completely wasted. You've been able to use it resourcefully. Bedhampton Road.
Thank you, Chairman. 68 Bedhampton Road, Copner Ward. Change of use from a dwelling house C3 to the flexible use C3 or C4 across a 10-year period. This is at the northern end of Bedhampton Road, a terraced property. There's one here. Two other HMOs within the 50-metre policy radius. So this one, if approved, would take it up when in C4 use. Reminder, it's flexible between C3 and C4, but when in C4 use, would take the area up to 4.16% within the 10% threshold indicated in our guidance. Existing 2-storey house, 3 bedrooms upstairs. This would be extended as per normal with a permitted development, rear extension and roof extension to provide 6 bedrooms. Each of the bedrooms are en suite. so 2 on each floor. There is a utility and tanks room, quite a large one, on the first floor as well. Extra space to bear in mind. And then in the rear wing, a kitchen, diner, communal room. In terms of floor sizes and general disposition, the communal kitchen dining room just meets the standard. But additionally, there is this first floor utility and tank room. It's got shown a WC. It could have utilities, cupboards, storage, etc., as an additional area to augment the main communal shared room, along with all the bedrooms and the en-suites. So, based on the disposition and size of the property for 6 individuals and the local balance, officers are happy to recommend the scheme to the committee.
Thank you.
This application is for a change of use from a dwelling house to a flexible use C3 residential and C4 HMO use. The property provides 6 ensuite bedrooms. All of the bedrooms meet or exceed the 10 square metre requirement, which then results in a 22.5 square metre requirement of communal area. In this case, there's 22.68 square metre of communal area at ground floor, and there's an additional utility room at first floor. Within the officer report, they make reference to the usability of the entrance to the kitchen area. This committee has refused a similar scheme on this basis on 13 Shadwell Road, which has recently been allowed to appeal. This is therefore not considered a reason for refusal. In this case, above that of the scheme overturned at Shadwell by the Inspectorate, there's also an additional utility room, as previously mentioned, at 6.48 square metres. This will house the washing machine and dryer and will relieve the impacts of use within the kitchen area, and is an additional area the residents can use to dry clothes, etc. The planning officer has recommended this fully compliant application for approval today, and I ask you all to fully support this recommendation and save time and cost for all parties in taking this to appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Members? Any questions? I mean, it's tight, isn't it? It's sizing, so what was that? So my question is that the width between bedroom 6 and the kitchen units?
Thank you, Councillor. You're referring to the width along here, which is the entry into the kitchen dining room, effectively. Yes, we did look at that, the case officer and I, considering the general use of the property, people coming and going through that corridor, and also with bikes. It's 3.6 metres long, 0.95 metres wide, 95 centimetres wide. That's the same width as my hall that I mentioned I measured last night. So it's not a narrow hall, I would say. You can certainly get a bike up and down it, or 2 people coming in and going out at the same time. We had an inspector's decision in the recent past, I think 2, where this sort of matter has cropped up quite reasonably, and the inspector noted that people coming through or a bike coming through is a transient, momentary thing. You're in or you're out, and then people can carry on living and moving in the property as per normal. So combined with the first floor utility and tank room, which is quite a big extra area, as the applicant's agent has pointed out, for storage, tumble dryers, etc., we feel the combination of those 2 things makes this acceptable. And in the brief moments where someone's coming in with a bike, for example, someone who might just be reaching down to a cupboard along there would just have to stand up and let the person through, and then you get back to your normal business for those 2 or 3 seconds. So we were on balance happy enough with it.
Thank you. Judith?
I like to see a utility room. I think that's great. Is the window an opening window? Will there be any other form of drying in there, so it doesn't become a kind of really nasty, mildewy place?
That's normally a bedroom, isn't it, with the window looking down the rear alley, let's call it. And on the elevations, that's shown as a normal window with a top opening light. So yeah, I'm sure everyone would want ventilation, and I'm sure that will happen.
I wondered if we needed to condition that. It's quite important because it'll either be used, or if it's dry, actually, somewhere you can dry clothes, or it will not be used. And I don't see any washing machines in there or anything. Is there going to be a washing machine in there?
I think to that level of detail, as planning officers, we wouldn't go to that level of detail. I don't think it's a planning matter as to whether or not that room is ventilated, but I'm absolutely confident that that's an existing aperture in a Victorian property. It's been there for many decades, and I'm absolutely sure it will remain and have some ventilation. So I don't think it's would meet any of the tests to apply such a condition, but I'm sure it would happen anyway.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, just to confirm, this would only be a 6-bedroom HMO. It wouldn't be turned into a 7-bedroom with the utility being an additional bedroom as it has been previously. Can that be applied as a condition?
As per previous discussions, in short, yes, you can attach a condition should you wish to.
Do you wish to?
Propose that as a condition.
Yeah. Yeah. And Councillor Smythe is supporting that. So we have that condition to add. Any other comments or thoughts? I think we have to move the officer's recommendation. I mean, it's tight though, isn't it, on space? But the space standards are the space standards. So with the conditions, those in favour of moving the officer's recommendation? Yes, sorry, Judith. Yeah. Those in favour? And those against? And abstentions? Thank you. Thank you.
Planning permission is granted.
Thank you, Julian. That concludes today's business, and thank you, members. So it's been a little bit warm. Go and get some fresh air. I'll close the meeting at 2:06.